Hello and welcome to A Grain of Sanderson, a podcast where we're foolishly reading all of Brandon Sanderson's work in publication order. I'm joined by Taylor Lane.
Hello.
Jack McLaughlin.
Hello.
And a very special guest, we are joined by podcaster and musician Kirk Hamilton.
Hello there. Hi.
We have been organizing this since January, and it has finally all come together.
That's podcasting. You got to plan ahead.
Yes, indeed, unfortunately.
Yeah, something we're definitely really good at and do very well is plan ahead and schedule this podcast.
Definitely something everybody learns slowly. I'm still working on it myself.
Understandably so. Today we read two books, though Kirk will just be joining us for the first one, since that is the Cosmere book. We read The Emperor's Soul and Legion. Emperor's Soul being set in the world of Elantris, and Legion being a lot. We'll get there. We'll get there later.
We will, yes.
Do we want to just jump into our one-sentence summaries?
Yes, sure.
Well, since you're laughing,
I didn't know that
what's
we
yours?
were doing... Well, I didn't know if we were doing, like, full one-sentence summaries, because, like, whatever. My one-sentence summary is that I want to congratulate Brandon Sanderson for making it out of his broke boy era, because I feel like the last four things we've read have been questionable in quality, and I feel like we've finally gotten back to, like, some quality work of his.
That's
just feel
fair.
like he was cashing in for the last one, and I feel like in this time of his life, he like just married his wife. I have a feeling he needed to like pay for that wedding.
He had to pay for all the swords that he gave to all of his wedding guests.
Yeah, so congrats to him for actually getting back to doing like art and not just whatever slop you've been serving us the last few episodes.
Hey, the Infinity Blade novella was fine.
No, that is number
are
one
alone
slop
in
in
that
question.
I liked our episode.
I was referring specifically to Infinity Blade. No.
My one sentence is just best character work since Warbreaker, and I want more.
Yeah, that's fair.
Nothing super exciting.
Kirk?
Do I get to go next?
Yeah.
Okay. My one sentence summary is what if Dave but with magic? And
Yeah, actually.
this ties into a broader theory of Brandon Sanderson that I've been working on, and I have not read as many Sanderson books as you all have, but I do have a broader theory. I'll get into it later, but that is my one sentence. What if Dave, as in the Kevin Kline film Dave, but with magic?
Yes, indeed.
Nice. You'll have to summarize what Dave is. I don't know that. I'm not familiar with that.
Ah, well,
It's an Ivan
maybe
Reitman
we can
movie.
do the last. We can.
Yeah,
we
we'll
can
do the
hear
last
Dan's
one, then we'll go
sentence, and
into
then
it.
We can just talk about Dave for a while. Maybe that's pretty good.
Dave is a great movie. My one sentence summary is Sanderson keeps stumbling into queer themes for his books, and I don't think he realizes, but I'm still here for it.
So true.
So Dave, let me summarize Dave, and maybe in the process we can summarize The Emperor's Soul as well. Dave is a
True.
1993 Ivan Reitman film starring Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney
Yeah.
Weaver is fantastic in this movie, by the way. I watched it not that long ago. What was that?
Isn't Ving Rhames also in it?
Yes, there's a lot. It's like every character actor ever is
Okay,
in
good,
it.
yeah.
And this is 93, which is right before Pulp Fiction, so it's Ving Rhames on the upswing.
Oh my
But it's
god,
got,
this is just Emperor's Soul. Sorry, I just read the synopsis.
Yeah, Charles Grodin actually is in it, and is great. Ben Kingsley is the villain. It's got all kinds of great actors. Frank Langella, another villain. Actually, Kingsley is the vice president. He's like the patsy. He's not the villain. He's kind of a nice guy. Anyhow, the story is basically that the president has some sort of like a stroke or something and falls into a coma. And it turns out that this guy, Dave, who's played by Kevin Kline, looks exactly like him and had been hired as a freelancer to occasionally impersonate the president. Or I suppose just one time. They hire him to like walk out of a state dinner because the president doesn't want to do it. So he's like Padme's body double in The Phantom Menace or whatever. He's basically that. But then they're like, we need you to come and actually be the president because no one can know that the president is in a coma. So then he moves to the White House and he becomes the president. And then it's a great movie. It's very I guess it's like a Frank Capra kind of thing because he's a really decent guy. Like his whole life is finding unemployed people work. Like he works at a work center where he just helps people. And the president himself is actually a huge dick. And of course, Kevin Kline plays both of them. And so he is like, it's like, what if a good man suddenly just body swapped in for the president, who was a huge jerk. And then he also falls in love with the president's wife, which is a pretty fun little subplot. And she's played by Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a really fun movie. I totally recommend it. I watched it not that long ago, and it holds up.
And I guess with that, we can go to the summary of Emperor's Soul.
Right.
We can see how this is just...
we can lay out the parallels to this film in this short story.
Yeah, so starting with the summary, please correct me if I get any of these. I should not be the one having to pronounce these
We
names
can go over the pronunciation for names. Wan Shai Lu is what they say in the audiobook.
Okay, Wan Shai Lu.
And then
Gautona?
Gautona, yeah. And
Gautona.
The Emperor himself.
I don't think I wrote his name down in the
It's
summary,
fine. He doesn't.
I'm
just
saving
call him the
myself.
Emperor.
Yeah, we can go with the Emperor.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Wan Shai Lu is a master forger, skilled at forging paintings, writings, and more importantly, souls. With the magic of soul stamping, she can place a stamp on any object or person that will rewrite its past. This has wondrous applications such as transforming a crude, mass-produced pot into a masterwork, or giving a person the memories and skills of a trained warrior. This story takes place on Sel, the same world as Elantris, but in the Rose Empire. It begins with Shai imprisoned in the Imperial Palace after being caught attempting to steal the Moon Scepter, an Imperial artifact, and replace it with one of her own fakes. She was, however, betrayed by her co-conspirator and captured. Before she is to be executed, she is given an offer by the Imperial Arbiters to earn her life back. The Emperor had been nearly killed in an assassination attempt and left without a mind, technically alive but lacking any memory, personality, or sense of self. Worried that if the Emperor was dead, they would lose political power, the Arbiters recruit Shai to forge a set of replacement memories and personality to restore the Emperor back to normal. She is given 100 days for this task that would normally take years. Confined to a room and under careful guard, Shai begins the process of researching everything she can about the Emperor, his habits, his journals, notes from staff and other officials that have worked with him. She needs to understand not only what the different aspects of his personality were, but what influences throughout his life had created them. During this time, she also plans her escape, as she is sure the promises of freedom are false and that she will be killed upon completion. While working, she works with Gautona, one of the Arbiters and former close friend and sort of father figure to the Emperor. Together they discuss the nature and morality of forgery, both the mundane and mystical. She tests some of her early attempts at reforging the Emperor's soul, which leads to Gautona realizing the full depth of resentment the Emperor had started to form for him. During this time, Shai uses forgery to turn her drab room into beautiful works of art by rewriting the history of the furniture, windows, and floors into stunning and well-maintained versions of them. As the deadline approaches, Shai keeps considering opportunities to escape before the deadline, but she has developed a desperate desire to see her task complete. Near her last day, after she completes the soul stamps that will forge a new soul for the Emperor, the captain of the guard arrives to preemptively execute her. She escapes using a trap floor she had prepared and sprints out of her rooms. Instead of going to escape, however, she first takes her completed stamps to the Emperor's room, sneaks in, and tests them on him. They work, and the Emperor is restored. Running from there, she runs into Gautona, whom she tells about her success. In a moment of authenticity and empathy, he returns her essence marks, her most prized possessions, and she continues with her escape. She uses one of her essence marks to rewrite her history into a version of herself that was trained by warriors and is able to fight her way free from the skeletal monsters sent after her. She escapes the palace and eventually the city, satisfied that one of her forgeries now sits on the Rose Throne. Back in the palace, Gautona reads the book of notes Shai had given him, realizing that not only did she reforge a new soul for the Emperor, but she added subtle changes that would drive him to grow and effectuate the changes he had formerly lost his passion for. He is driven to tears, seeing the notes as a true work of art, but knows that its existence threatens to undermine the secrecy of the forgery, so he burns the notebook.
That scene in particular is such a great button.
It's a strong ending, and it doesn't need to tie into anything else, right? He's not setting up anything larger, which is really one of the strengths of this story, or at least it was for me.
Yeah.
That it's pretty short, it's self-contained, and it does what it sets out to do.
Part of me is really afraid that we're going to see a return of one of these characters in like a future book, which you know what, if we did, and if it was just a minor cameo, like if somewhere we see like some other work that she's done or something like that, that'd be fine. But I'm so worried that in Wind and Truth, she's going to be like a character or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I like the self-contained nature of it.
And it's kind of fun because it is on a world he's been in before. It's the same world as Elantris, but we don't see any Elantrians ever. I think we see this empire's like sort of version of them. They talk about the Grands as if they're like sort of a different species of human, like to a degree that I think there might be some like fantasy race stuff going on here, but it's not like super clear.
There's a couple more parallels to Elantris that I actually wanted to draw attention to.
She runs into a Gjorn, one of the red priests.
Yeah. And also the gentleman who, the Blood Sealer, his magic seems very similar to the priest that Hrathen was a member of, like the similar sort of like necromantic and bone magic. And also at some point someone uses like an Elantrian seal, like someone writes the symbol Reo.
Yeah.
Which of course like connects to Reodin since he's named for the city of Elantris and all that. But
Right, that's right. Elantris was like the second book of his, I think, that I read. I read Warbreaker, then Elantris, and then Mistborn. At some point here we could go through the books that I've actually read.
Yeah.
I really did like Warbreaker. I was trying to do a ranking, which we can do later, but I do like that one.
That's incredible.
It's kind of up there for me. Even though I think some people don't. I feel like I got some emails when I talked about it on Triple Click on my video game show. I mentioned some of the Sanderson books I've read, and there were some people who were like, "Oh man, you shouldn't have opened with Elantris and Warbreaker. Those are the two worst ones. Read Mistborn or whatever."
Warbreaker is weirdly controversial online. It's like it's everyone either thinks it's like a sleeper hit or they think it's just kind of boring and whatever. Some people will treat it purely as you need to read it because there will be Cosmere references to it in future books and stuff.
So funny. It's the Cosmere part of this is so interesting because I am not really very dialed into the Cosmere, even as someone who's somewhat recently started reading Sanderson and just enjoying watching this mechanic assemble parts, which is kind of how I feel when I read his books. I'm kind of there to just watch this guy graft pipes onto other pipes until he creates something pretty interesting, and then and then it all blows up in the end in an entertaining way. Like that's basically the experience for me, and I like that. But I'm not that caught up in the Cosmere. And then I read Tress of the Emerald Sea. Which then, am I correct, Graham, that you hate this? That you hate this
yeah,
story?
A little bit. Yeah,
that you like famously hate it. Okay,
I love it.
That,
so that's gonna be interesting when we get to that.
Interesting. Okay, and you haven't recorded an episode about it.
No, we will record that in 2028 is our current timeline.
Well, this is not a wound that I need to pick at amongst the three of you, but I read it just because it was in at the library, and and it was short, and I just kind of read it for fun. The whole time I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is a lot like The Princess Bride. And then it ended, and he's like, well, I wanted to write a book like The Princess Bride. Anyways, reading it though, the whole thing, like Hoyd is like the narrator of the story, and I had no idea who that was. So the whole time I was reading it, I was like, I can just tell I'm missing a lot here. And then there is a point, this isn't really too much of a spoiler, but there's also a point at which like Elantrian magic appears out of nowhere in that story. And I had read Elantris and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So this must be like an Elantrian or something.
You're like really missing something. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, I don't know. I suppose knowing that it exists, knowing that the Cosmere is out there, that's interesting. But at least for me, it's not really that central. And so it's interesting knowing that this is set, I suppose, in the same place as Elantris, but it feels very separate from it, at least to me.
Which is interesting because it's one of those things that like in interviews and stuff, Sanderson has repeatedly promised, and I think even at the point that this Emperor's Soul came out, he repeatedly promised that his goal is for all of his series to be standalone. He has stated that he doesn't want it to be that like, oh, you need to have read all of his other stuff to understand it. But I feel like that promise has been failing in his more recent stuff. Like,
interesting.
When you get to the later stuff, it really does start to feel. It starts to feel like trying to watch a Marvel movie nowadays. It's like, if you're not caught up on all the shows and all the previous movies, like you can probably watch it and still have a good time, but like you'll know you're missing things.
That's very interesting. I did have that experience, like reading Tress. I mean, it was still fine, but it felt much more to me like watching Ant-Man Quantumania or whatever. I guess a movie I haven't seen, but that I gather is that kind of experience where you're very aware of all the things that you need to know in order to fully appreciate it. I think that Tress was also the first time I've seen the word Cosmere written in one of his books. Someone mentions the Cosmere.
That was the next question I was going to ask Kirk is, have you read The Way of Kings or any of the Stormlight books yet?
Yes, I just read The Way of Kings. I read it actually. I finished it. I read it more recently than The Emperor's Soul.
Okay.
And have not listened to your episodes about it. I saw you had to do a 2-parter, which
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah,
It's hefty.
It's a long one.
She's hefty.
Yeah, it is a long one. And yeah, it sort of relates to the current way that I'm thinking of Sanderson and his storytelling approach. But yeah, I did read it. And Hoyd turns up, of course, in that one. And that was my first time, I think, meeting Hoyd a little bit more as he typically appears, which is this mysterious, almost shaman-like bard who kind of appears and plays music for you and, is the mystic who shows you something about your destiny and then just vanishes.
Yeah, and I guess since we're just talking about the Cosmere right here, we should point out that since he appears in every single book, and that's kind of his shtick, his appearance in this book, he is the imperial fool that betrayed our main character, Shai, at the beginning of the book.
No way.
So it's just the implication of Hoyd.
Oh, sure. Okay.
This might be, I know I said I wanted to push the prologue talk to the end, but like the prologue stuff is all about that.
Oh, really?
Or maybe we
Okay.
can get to that, or maybe we can get to that
Interesting.
later.
No, if you want to just bring it up briefly right now.
I'll bring it up. I will talk about it more in detail later because there's interesting stuff to talk about. But there was my Kindle version I got came with the original prologue that he cut and replaced with the prologue we have, which is the current prologue is the arbiters kind of discussing like what do we do about the emperor. The word I keep want to say I'm pretty sure is like kind of offensive, so I'm trying to think of like what the actual like term for. He's out. There's no mind anymore. There's no.
He's
stuff.
brain dead.
He's brain dead. That's kind of that's a term where I wasn't really sure how.
Yeah, he's
appropriate
become
it
like
was.
an empty vessel. He's,
Yeah, he's brain dead. The current prologue is the arbiters kind of discussing like what do we do. The old prologue was Shai in the prison, and the imperial fool comes to chat with her, and that's where it's like so apparent it's Hoyd, and there's a whole paragraph about how she looks into his eyes and just sees the weight of ages in it, and like, and also it sucks. The prologue also just sucks because she doesn't figure out the details of her prison or that the people are going to come to ask her like a favor. He tells her, here are the details of your prison, and by the way, you're about to have an opportunity to escape. They're going to come ask for stuff.
That definitely takes away from it.
Thank God he showed restraint.
No, he didn't show restraint. An editor showed up and was like, "Hey, buddy,
Okay.
This
you should
sucks.
get rid of this." But we'll get to that. We'll get to that more in detail later.
Is the
when we wanna
editor
talk
named?
about-
Is it his first editor, Moshe
It's
Feder?
not his. It's not the. I don't think it's the not normal editor. Let me.
Okay,
I
cool.
think it is.
Let me find it again.
Oh wait,
'cause-
never mind. I was thinking about
Yeah.
Legion. Never mind.
Replace it with the current. Mary Robinette Cowell was the person who told him like get rid of this.
Okay.
Describes it as a darling that needs to be killed. Like he liked writing it, and then someone came to him and was like, "No, this doesn't actually work."
Yeah, it's really the challenge of having the character who turns up and tells you that you're in a story and that it's going to go a certain way, which is a regular feature of his stories.
Mm-hmm.
The main characters really feel like they're main characters. It's a thing that Kaladin, he is so evidently a main character throughout that story. I really enjoyed Way of Kings, but the fact that he is wearing literal plot armor the whole time, the arrows actually miss him because he can't die, and also because you're like, well, I know there's like 17 more books in this series and this guy isn't gonna die, but and he's got Tinkerbell with him, and he's just so clearly special that I don't know, like, it's one thing to have a character like that. I guess for the most part, I cruise with it when Sanderson does that, because whatever, his protagonists are going to survive the whole story. That's kind of how a story like this works. But then when you have a guy show up and say, "Hi there, it's me. I'm kind of the author. And so you're really important, and you're going to do all this stuff, and here's a bunch of visions about it," that can feel like a hat on a hat or something.
Yeah, and this might be a little bit illuminating to you as well, Kirk, is it probably won't shock you to know that Hoyd is based on a tabletop character that Brandon played as a either teenager or college student. So this is like a character that's been with him for a long time that he is introducing into his work.
Interesting. That's not actually the story I heard about where Hoyd came from.
Really?
Oh,
Okay, let me
what
see if I can
story
find a
did you
source
hear?
for that.
No, the story, and I don't know what the source is off the top of my head. Like I remember him saying this in one of his lectures or interviews like a long time ago. But it was just I remember an interview where he would say that when he was reading books as a kid, he just liked to imagine, like kind of daydream about like, I don't remember if it was him running around in the background or just like to think about like, oh, this guy, like they're running around in the back. It was just like a little daydream exercise that there was like a little guy running around in the background of all the stories he was reading that was like the same guy. And then he just decided to make that like a thing in his books when he started writing them. And Hoyd very much started out purely Easter egg, purely just a fun little like wink and a nudge, just like for fun thing.
Yeah, he doesn't become load bearing until Way of Kings.
You want to be careful about a load bearing Hoyd.
So yeah, here it is. Hoyd, under the name Topaz, was Brandon Sanderson's first Dungeons and Dragons character.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
He has a kind of a tabletop-y role in that a DM will sometimes need a character to just show up and explain to everybody what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that is actually kind of appropriate that he had tabletop origins.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I would have liked to know that for like Way of Kings, because I'm still very struck by the description in The Way of Kings where he was like, I started as like words on a page. That was like, that was very like, and then he was like, and then I became something greater than that or something like that.
I mean, that section of the book. So for the most part, I described Sanderson as a mechanic. I don't find his writing to be very beautiful on its own. In fact, sometimes I find it to be quite just workmanlike and even clumsy. The opening line of this book, actually, we were talking about the intro. The opening 2 sentences of this book are, Gautona ran his fingers across the thick canvas, inspecting one of the greatest works of art he had ever seen. Unfortunately, it was a lie. I started it and I was like, well, this does not bode well. Because I don't know, I was reading something else that was like written with verve and style and a love of language. And then I'm like, oh, right, Brandon Sanderson is much more straightforward. That's not to like knock the guy exactly, because he really knows how to tell a story. And when he's cooking, he's really cooking. But he's like not a master of language. And yet, after reading 7,000 pages of Way of Kings, the section near the end where Kaladin sits down with Hoyd and he tells this story playing this flute, the imagery of that, of the smoke and the fire, I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is, you know, Sanderson is really on a roll here. So he clearly is inspired by Hoyd to kind of reach as a writer, and I really like that.
Yeah, I also think the appearance where he has in Warbreaker, where he just sort of briefly tells a story to Ciri, is like, again, one of the stronger scenes of just like, he does like a cool trick with some sand. Who knows if it's magic or not, but like, I do think that when he's operating in that sort of mode, and he rarely reaches for it, but when he does, it's really, really strong. And I wish he would do it more. But I understand that most of what he's doing is he wants to be read like really transparently so that, like, for example, his action flows really well. Like, you know, you read a Sanderson action scene and you know exactly where everything is at all times. And that's really hard to do.
I brought up this comparison before, but there was one time where Sanderson described it as like, you look at I think this was in the Mistborn, like annotations, but when you're looking at a story, you're looking through a window and like the author is the one building the window. Some authors build like a beautiful stained glass that like kind of shapes and colors everything. He's just trying to make the clearest, most open window he can. Like that makes sense. And it would make sense that he's so cognizant of it, that he approaches things that way consciously. There is a sort of a overlap with interactive entertainment, with tabletop games and with video games, in the way that the mechanics of the story and the framing of the story are one thing and the execution of the story is another. And in interactive entertainment, you're kind of building a space for people to then execute the story within. It's like why a lot of video games don't have a good story is because you don't really need character work and all this stuff, because as long as the game is fun and the space has been designed well for people to express themselves within it, it'll be successful as a work. And these stories sometimes feel kind of similarly. The world building, the rules, the magic systems are all so well done that you just put a story inside of it and it moves along. I guess I've been talking about this thought I've been having about Sanderson. I'll just throw it out there, that it feels to me like he is so great at building these systems, and then
he's very wise about what he steals to tell his stories. Like the first Mistborn book is a really good time. Graham, you mentioned the action sequences, and I agree. I think that was the first time I realized that he's a great action writer. He's writing these incredibly elaborate, physically complex, three-dimensional fight scenes with people flipping and flying through the air and reversing and pushing off of metal and swinging around, and yet I'm totally oriented at any moment in time. It's like watching a John Wick movie or something where the editing is really good and you can just follow the fight scene. Or Fury Road is a great example, right, of the maybe best edited action movie ever made. And he feels that way. Then the story itself is just the Matrix. It's so similar to the Matrix at so many times. It has so many similar beats, the agents and, the oppressed people and the rising up and learning that you're special and you have these powers and learning to master them and then watching your, the guy who trained you go up against an agent and then he gets captured and then you have to, it feels so much like the Matrix. And that's, I think, really smart because he puts so much creative work into coming up with this really cool metal burning magic system. Then he's like, you know what? We're just going to do the Matrix. I mentioned already, I feel like this story, it has this amazing, like, whatever forgery system, this whole idea that you could rebuild things. And then he's like, what if we kind of made it Dave? And we like that movie's pretty good. And then just to go through a few more, I mean, Kaladin's story in Way of Kings is kind of Gladiator, right? It is so close to Gladiator, of the great military leader who is then brought so low and made a slave, and then he teaches military discipline to his fellow slaves, and they learn to value one another, and he becomes a leader because you just can't repress what a great leader he is. And then it's put in the framework of a story that's interesting in places, less interesting in others. The coolest thing, the coolest idea for me anyways, that book has going is just the bridge crew idea. The fact that these wars are fought by people who run with bridges and have to throw bridges over these chasms. That's so creative and cool, and then leads to all of this interesting mechanical, tactical storytelling. And then he's like, what if it's just Gladiator on top of that?
Gladiator in that setting. Yeah.
And this is definitely I respect this a lot. I think he's very smart about when to borrow and when to be creative, and he's so creative with the things that he comes up with. It's just something I've noticed the more of his books that I've read.
I really want to point out, I don't know if you read the postscript of The Emperor's Soul, at the end, but
yes, I did.
Yeah, if you remember, he has this line. He's talking about the whole idea of write what you know. And the whole well, you can't know everything, right? He's never, I think he specifically says I've never been a woman. I've never been in this culture, whatever. But he talked about how a big part of it is observing and taking things and putting them out. And then he has this line, being a writer then is as much about observation as it is imagination. And that feels to fit right into your theory. He has his imagination for these worlds, and then the observation is just, these cool. I saw this story already. I've seen these characters and stories play out somewhere else.
Worked. Yeah.
Let me see what fits.
I would also say that, he is borrowing. I can't believe I didn't make the Gladiator parallel because I had just rewatched it right before going into.
Good movie.
It's a good movie. I had just rewatched it going into Way of Kings because Gladiator 2 was about to come out around the same time as our episode. So I was like, I'll watch the original and get it in the theater.
Yeah, I haven't seen Gladiator 2 yet.
You don't need to.
Don't bother.
Yeah, that's kind of what I hear.
There's one sequence with sharks that's fun.
Okay, love sharks.
But that's true across a lot of his work, particularly the ones where I think it's most readable. And I think we've mentioned this on air before, but Tress of the Emerald Sea, obviously working with the Princess Bride, and all of the Secret Project books, apart from, I think, the Frugal Wizard's Handbook, are working off of a different movie where he's let's do this movie in the Cosmere. So Princess Bride is Tress of the Emerald Sea, Sunlit Man is Mad Max Fury Road, and then
funny.
Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is Your Name, the Makoto Shinkai anime movie.
Which I've never seen and I've heard is amazing, and I've never seen it even.
It's pretty good. If you got 90 minutes, it's worth your time. But yeah, he will do that a lot, and those are the ones where it's most readable. Twice now you've pointed out ones where it's I can't believe I didn't think about that at the time with The Matrix and Gladiator. Because in hindsight, oh yeah.
I mean, the Matrix one especially, because you're just waiting for Vin to throw down against the Steel Inquisitor. It just like you just can't wait for Neo to finally take on Agent Smith. And then when she finally does, it kicks ass, and you've been so excited for it. I was like, this really is the same feeling.
Yeah. Well, we've gone for half an hour about the Cosmere. Should we get a little bit more into the book besides it being Dave?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Going into particularly the writing and creativity as themes, I think this is the most work that Sanderson has done into like his creative process. That's the most like transparently available. His creative process has sort of been in the work itself. And the fact that he's operating in such a sense that he thinks of it as, or at least in the system, he thinks of it as empathy and understanding. Shai, our main character, has to like truly understand an object before she can transform it into something else and help an object to be, she often says, like the best version of itself. It honestly has a huge amount of overlap with soul casting, which, I mean, we've only seen a very little bit of soul casting, technically, in The Way of Kings. And Sanderson himself makes that same comparison in the postscript. Mm-hmm. This is the same sort of magic system. But this feels, while obviously in conversation with it, this feels so much stronger to me because the whole magic system is operating on the material conditions of the world, which I think are often like really, really missing from Sanderson, is something that at least I bring up frequently. We'll like enter the world and all the world building will be really cool. And then I'm like, okay, but how does a normal person interact with this? And while our main character is not a normal person,
she's like a savant. She's like the best
she's
forger
really good.
Ever. She's really talented.
I think part of the reason that's so strong is we get to see a person with a normal Sandersonian level of competence of like, I'm the best in the world at this. Callan is the best dude who's ever used a spear. And Shai is the best person, the best forger alive. And it's so cool to see it, like someone with that level of competence in a Sanderson book who is using it for something other than violence or scholarship. And like they're the best artist in the world, basically. Mm-hmm. That's such a refreshing change of pace from so often where like, you know, like I like these books for the most part, and I think that the action is super cool, but almost every problem is resolved by like the coolest fight scene you've ever seen. So to see like the problems being resolved here by thoughtful meditation and getting to really understand someone and doing character work, that it feels so different and refreshing.
I mean, there's multiple times where it describes how like, to do forgery, you basically have to know how to do the thing, right? Like to forge and this like non-magical mundane forgery, like to forge a painting, you have to know how to paint. You have to be really good at painting. And that's the same thing with forging. And I think like Galtona even makes a comment when she uses the magic to like put a mural on her wall. And he just says like, why didn't you just paint it? Like, why didn't you just, instead of like doing the forgery? And she was just like, well, this is my art, like doing it this way. Even if it required her truly understanding the art and painting.
Yeah, and I loved the 3 parts of the magic system. I thought that was really refreshing. He says in the book that they need the physical, cognitive, and spiritual sides to really understand all 3 parts of it. And I think that to me, what the Emperor's Soul brings that's new is like the cognitive side. I feel like I really loved the way that he used like human perception as like an anchoring point to like everything around the magic system, and I thought that hadn't really happened yet in like his other magic systems.
I'm glad you pointed that out, which is really cool to me reading it in this particular order, to realize that this is the first time he brought that stuff up, because that theme is going to keep going through a lot of his other stuff.
That's really good. I thought this was going to be a one-off, and I'm really excited because I really liked that part of it.
This is like a core part of like Cosmere stuff that I was shocked to realize, oh wait, it first comes up here.
I love that idea. Taylor, I have that in my notes, that all things exist in 3 realms, physical, cognitive, and spiritual. That section, I think, is just a really interesting way to think of things, to think of reality, even outside of a magic system. I've spent a lot of time lately thinking about music and what music is and how music works. And the moment when a musical idea becomes music, because it is a really fascinating moment when you have you think of something in your mind, and say you're playing guitar, and you've got a melody and you know what it's going to sound like, and then you strike the string with your pick, and then it just sounds a little bit different than what you heard in your head, because those two things are separate. And then someone else hears what you played, and they hear it their own way and interpret it their own way and maybe play something back to you. And that's like the essential energy exchange that is music. And I think that music actually is a kind of magic. It's the closest thing to magic that there is that human beings can do. And really getting down to it, it's really similar to what Sanderson is talking about here. And that's kind of the spiritual. And I really like this breakdown. The physical being, that's the sound wave. That's the actual thing that you can measure in nature. The cognitive is more related to our own measurements, I guess, and our own perceptions. He also says, he says how it is viewed and how it views itself, which is interesting and does kind of tie into this magic system, that not only do we hear the sound and measure it with a spectrograph, the sound itself has some awareness of what it is, which is just kind of a cool idea.
And enough awareness to accept or reject the magic, too.
Right, that it is like, it needs to be, it has some essential, right, if not consciousness, like quality that makes it hold together. And then the spiritual is, let me think, I wrote it down. It contains its essence, the ways it is connected to the things and the people around it. And I really like that, because that's basically what happens when you put music into the world, or anything into the world, is other people see it, and then suddenly it transforms. It becomes something to each of them, and then that causes them to create their own new things, and then that just creates this huge cycle of like spiraling energy. So I really dig that a lot. And that then this whole magic system is just built around empathy and understanding, that it's, you can create anything if you can understand it. What a cool idea, and what a very writerly idea.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Actually, and also, it's not just you can create anything. It kind of isn't you can create anything. You have to create something that the thing you're trying to change kind of accepts as well.
I suppose that's
like
true. Like, I was being overly glib. You're right. It's more. It's not. Almost, I can create anything.
Well, no, but what I just like that, because it's like there's almost like an element of consent to the magic, where it's like,
right.
if you want to change a table, give it a change that it wants to have, that it wants to accept and believe in and like sees for itself.
Right. That's very true. You can't just say abracadabra and it becomes a frog. You have to have a convincing reason that the table would have been a frog instead of being a table.
Yeah.
That's so cool. We've talked about consent before in magic systems, like what happened to Vivenna in Warbreaker. Was
the whole exchange of breath. Yeah.
The exchange of breath is one way, and so the person who's accepting the breath does not have to consent to it. And so it's kind of cool that he's bringing in like the idea that the table has to like consent now.
That's
and that,
right.
Like,
that's interesting. I'd kind of forgotten that about Warbreaker.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool.
One other thing on the sort of spiritual level that I really liked is on day 98. This is the Shy at her most manic. She's about to finish the stamp, and she hasn't slept in like 3 days in the process of doing this, but she's about to finish the stamp, and she says she remained in place kneeling. The stamp seemed the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Her ancestors had worshipped rocks that fell from the sky at night, the souls of broken gods, those chunks had been called. Master craftsmen would carve them to bring out the shape. Once Shy had found that foolish. Why worship something you yourself created? Kneeling before her masterpiece, she understood. She felt as if she'd bled everything into that stamp. She'd pressed 2 years' worth of effort into 3 months, then topped it off with a night of desperate, frantic carving. During that night, she'd made changes to her notes, to the soul itself. Drastic changes. So just the idea here that I really like of Sanderson being like, your act of creativity is like an act of spirituality. It's an act of prayer.
And I love that she's making huge changes at the very end. She's like, maybe she cut the prologue and replaced it with
Absolutely.
I get the sense he can relate.
Essential work being done in the edit.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I really dig. I mean, I really dig that there's a lot in this magic system and in this story that I think reflects Sanderson and the way that he thinks of his own work. Both that feeling, I mean, anyone, I'm sure all three of you, anyone listening to this who has ever made something written a song, written something, an essay that you're going to publish, where you've created it and it's just yours, and you have that moment where it's not in the world yet and you can change it as you want, and it is only between you and your work, and you do have this kind of magical excitement. It's not like anything else. And then you put it out there and it's always a little deflating, even if you're proud of it and people like it or whatever. It's not the same as that time where you're sitting alone, she's sitting alone and just aware of this masterpiece that she's done. And also just the concept, the idea behind rebuilding the emperor is the idea that we can take someone's work, their diaries, their journals, their writings, everything that they've done, and we can craft them out of it. We can rebuild them entirely, which is a really interesting thought, especially coming from someone like Brandon Sanderson, who has written more words than I'll ever even speak. So like he has this vast body of work that you could maybe, a forger like Shai could use his novels maybe and his journals to rebuild him. And that's just a really interesting idea. It's the kind of legacy, like struggling with legacy, I think, that a lot of artists do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've talked about how, at least my theory, that I think that Sanderson inserts himself in like the gods of the world, I feel like, where, because as an author, he is pushing around all the pieces on the puzzle, right. on the chessboard, right? And so just like the gods, do in his world.
Yeah, that's true. Even like Sazed becoming essentially a whatever all-powerful god, and Sazed also being the keeper of stories. Like that's so often the storytellers in his world are also the ones who wind up, with godlike power.
Yeah, and then like having Shai here kind of be that role is like really interesting. Like I feel like it's kind of maybe the first time that we've seen Sanderson's like place that he's inserted himself like a little bit more down to earth.
Kind of on that, and this is sort of my question for you guys, because like you guys who are much more involved in like the humanities than I just like writing silly little stories, but then otherwise very much like a science and like hard science kind of guy.
I just play saxophone, man.
But there's this interesting other theme, especially when we were talking about legacy, where Shai could not care less and seems to actively work against people giving her credit. There's a very, very individual, like, for example, the whole reason she wanted to steal the moon, or like the implied like reason she wanted to steal the moon scepter and replace it with a fake, wasn't out of any sense of like, haha, I want to have the moon scepter. It was the idea of she wants people to go into the imperial like archive and see her piece of art and have no idea that it's a fake. Like that to her. And then like the emperor is kind of like, she came to do that to the moon scepter and she ended up getting to do that to the emperor. One of her pieces of art is on the rose throne and nobody knows it's hers. And like Galtona keeps kind of interrogating her on this. You could be a great artist. You could be like make your own works that are famous. So why do you do forgery? Why do you do this type of art where the whole point is that nobody knows you did it?
It's a really interesting thing about her character, I think, that there's this kind of lack of self there. There's a line where she is like forcing herself to deal with what's happening. And she says, control yourself, become someone who can deal with this. And then in that moment, she basically disassociates and becomes a person who is coping with what's happening to her. And it's a pretty striking illustration of the kind of disassociation that people can actually undergo in challenging or traumatic circumstances. And then we learn over time that she's done this to herself many times, that she knows how to rewrite her entire history so she can become all these different people. And it kind of holds with her sitting there and holding her masterpiece for one moment when it's just hers and enjoying that moment. It's a really interesting contradiction at the heart of the character, because in so many ways she has erased herself because she's written over it so many times.
Something that you brought up a little bit earlier, and like this art being just for you before it goes out to the world, is my beautiful girlfriend is a miniature painter and she loves that sort of work. And she was telling me about how there's like a whole community of people who will paint the insides of like their Warhammer miniatures or the cockpits that are never actually visible because something gets like shaded over them, and do them in like extreme detail and then glue it shut so no one will ever see it. And it's like, it's just for me. Obviously, I'm using like the most nerdy possible example of that, but that she was telling me that last week.
Great illustration of it, yeah.
And like, I think that's sort of it, if like, she wants it just to be for her. And I think there's this core to the character of like, she loves the challenge of the art, and she just loves making art more than anything else. Towards the end, where we get the sort of action sequence where she transforms herself into a martial artist, I was a little let down by that sequence. I was like, this is a little silly and contrived. However, there there
has to be at least one action scene.
Yeah, there's got to be one.
Especially that there's like an army of monster skeletons. I was like, all right, whatever, guys.
He showed restraint, frankly.
However, the one thing that I really liked about that sequence is there's a moment where she's transformed into this martial artist. She has this completely different history where she's reflecting on herself, and it's that core to the character being the same again of, it's not really that I like fighting or that I need to do this, it's the challenge that matters. And that's the same when she's an artist, and that's the same that when she's a fighter too. And that redeemed the action sequence a little bit for me, but honestly, she could have just escaped.
Yeah, he's got to give us something, right? The big gooey explosion at the end.
Yeah, I have two things to that. One, I also found a lot of Sanderson in the... I was really struck by Shai being, I'm coming up to the edge of where I know the summit, and like there will be stuff on the other side of the summit, but it's like almost a formality to finish. Like she can see the finish line kind of thing. And I really loved the way that she described that. And I think that Sanderson probably sees his books in a similar manner, like maybe, the end of the first draft or something, when like all of that exciting energy is there, or end of the second draft or something like that, where he can like see where the story is fully going, and he's not even at the end of it yet. I think that's really cool. And then to the to the blood sealer thing. I thought that the blood sealer thing, I liked that sequence, one, because I think it was a lot more brutal than Sanderson usually does. Like she gets cut multiple times, she's bleeding everywhere, and I was like, oh, I liked it. I was like, there was actual consequences to her, like shoving her arm into a rib cage. Like usually, like if Kaladin did that, he wouldn't bleed. You know what I'm saying? Like, he would have figured out the perfect angle to not get scratched. But she got like
would have just
messed up.
And been like, "Whoa, he's so awesome! Oh my god!"
Kaladin wouldn't have knocked himself out by like slamming his face into a skull. Like,
I'm pretty sure he has headbutted people. And, like, Kaladin has headbutted people before.
I mean, let's keep in mind that like this headbutt that almost completely takes out our main character in this book. Vin at one point headbutts a dude so hard his head explodes like a melon.
That's funny. There should just be a breakdown of all the different headbutts in Sanderson. I'd forgotten the headbutt, Taylor. That's funny. Yeah. For clarity, you're saying you like the showdown with the skeletons at the end, like that, the fight, the like culmination of the blood sealer thing.
Well, what I think the bigger picture of why I like that fight is because people in the Empire thought that she was like the monster all along, and that this blood sealer could defeat her and keep her down. And I liked that in the end, it was a forger who could overcome this blood sealer, who was supposed to be seen as like, like the lesser of two evils, when in reality, like she could outthink this blood sealer. Though his tactics were very striking, they ultimately didn't have the finesse that she had. And I liked that the like finesse of like really preparing for this moment won out against like the 5 skeletons that like shambled towards her. So I thought it was like culturally, I thought it was cool that she defeated the skeletons.
Yeah, and that not only does she win and prove, of course, that the true evil is actually maybe the guy who's using blood magic to raise the dead into an unkillable army, but also that she also goes out of her way to restore the emperor, like that she does what she said she would do, and in the process, makes the empire even better than it was, like that she is actually true to her word and her principles, and generally a benevolent force.
And also on that whole empathy thing, like she definitely kind of, the very beginning of the book has a lot of disdain for like the emperor and like the culture and the empire and all that stuff. But then like by the end, she spent like, 100 days absorbing this guy's personality, like everything about him. And she comes down on like, no, like I actually think this is a good, just kind of misguided guy And so I'm going to add in a little tweaks to his soul just to make him like embrace the parts of him that are good, follow through on the good stuff he wanted to do. It was also like she developed empathy for the emperor that she didn't start the book with.
Yeah, it's a clever solution, right? That it isn't that she changes him to be good, it's that she helps him remember who he was before power and the responsibilities of his role sort of warped him and made him lose that, which is maybe a kind of a fine line, or, you know, it's like a subtle distinction, but it does feel like a worthwhile one, that she's not just doing whatever the one arbiter, whatever her name is, who wants him to, you know, to make him just fully acquiesce to the council and like totally change his brain. Like she's not doing something like that. She's just helping him be truer to himself.
I mean, absolutely. As someone who's been on hormone replacement therapy for a year, the idea of doing subtle changes to be a more true version of yourself, big thumbs up.
Right. Sure, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Taylor, you had something.
Yeah, I happen to be reading a book right now where the main characters are writing a biography, and they talk about it's Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, her newest book that she just put out. They're writing a biography, and so it's kind of was top of mind for me when I was reading this, where they talk about one of the characters kind of being like a porthole where you don't really see him, but he wrote the biography because he got very like connected to the other person. And I almost thought that the ending was kind of going to be like seeing in the emperor, Gautona is going to see remnants of Shay as like the author of like the biography that is the standing man like before him. And I thought that was going to be the ending. And I mean, she's a master forger though, so like that almost couldn't have been the ending. Like, but I thought that the ending was going to be that like the changes she made was like kind of leaving like a last hello, or last little bit of herself in the emperor.
I'm not gonna lie, because I read this so long ago the first time, I misremembered and did actually think that was what happened.
And the idea then is more that he sees her in the notes, right? She's kind of her genius lives in the notes, and then he destroys them and lets her go.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, on that sort of note of the ending, that button is so good because, I mean, for the listener, one of the things that she's caught for is she forges a painting and reveals to Gautona that she's destroyed it. And he's really mad at her for this. And then about halfway through the book, she reveals, like, I did this on behalf of the artist. He hates the empire and he's blind and he can't paint anymore. And the idea of one of his paintings living in the imperial palace, like, sickened him. So I destroyed it for him and I left it with a copy in its place.
Not just that, but that it was not just that he hated the empire, but that it was for for his wife.
Yeah,
it was for somebody. It wasn't for the empire, and his wife was long dead, and so he's like, it was for her. Go away, and that's more on that theme of like art being for the individual, and like it not needing to be this thing that has a claim and meaning to everybody. It's not it. Like, yeah, sure, other people can get meaning from things or whatever, but like you can derive value out of just who it's for, whether that's yourself or this one specific person.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. I had forgotten that beat that she was destroying the art. I remember as I read it, I found some of the intricacies with the heist that she got caught for, where she's stealing a scepter, but it's actually a painting, and then the painting was a forgery, and she replaced something with there was a lot of action going on there. But that is right. I do remember that eventual reveal being very cool. Yeah. There's something I wanted to throw to the three of you that I thought was also interesting, is the idea of people versus nature that's in this story. There's this bit where she's explaining, it's near the end, she's explaining to Gautona about what control really is, and she basically explains that the world is ruled by nature, and so people have imposed themselves around nature, and in doing so they've created a world where people are what surrounds us, like the will and the works of people. So instead of the wind blowing through your life, you put up a wall, and then the wall is the thing that is impacting your life. And then she says, here's the quote, it says, she says, "We may feel in control, but we never truly are unless we understand people. Controlling our environment is no longer about blocking the wind, it's about knowing why the serving lady was crying last night, or why a particular guard always loses at cards, or why your employer hired you in the first place." And I think that's just a really interesting idea, in that it separates humans from nature and also understands that the world we live in is a world made by humans, and that a forger needs to understand both. It's just a cool idea that he just sort of throws in there. It's not exactly central to every theme of the story, but I appreciated it. I found it really thought-provoking.
Really glad you brought that up as well, because one of the things I had here of I highlighted that same scene and put in my notes of this is like if Ayn Rand was fundamentally kind. Which like is an Ayn Rand that could not exist.
Oh yeah, huh?
But it's very like it almost feels like objectivist thinking, but the conclusion it draws is totally different.
Yeah, that's really funny.
Of like it's not that you have to control and manipulate the people around you because it's a human-centered world. If you grow too powerful, like you'll be attacked and these sort of things that Rand comes to. But instead, it's the sort of much more like quiet and diminutive of like, well, yeah, these things may be true, but if you understand the people around you, you may not necessarily need to react in the same way. And it was just a really sort of striking moment. And I don't think we've really ever seen anything like this from Sanderson before. Because again, this feels like such in a problems of adults book, which, like, don't get me wrong, most of his books feature the problems of adults, apart from like his young adult and middle grade books. I would say this is the first one in the Cosmere that solidly is like, oh yeah, this is like adult themes, adult problems. I so love that Shai is a young professional and not a hyper competent teen again. It's like she feels so more realized in that way.
I just had a thought too. We've talked before about Brandon Sanderson, about how everyone important is a wizard. That's that's like a kind of a thing that comes up in a lot of his books. Like everyone has to have magic. Like, you know, we had like Elend used to be, you know, the one character in the team that didn't have magic, or there used to be more characters in the Mistborn team that didn't have magic. And then, you know, they either die or get magic. But in this book, the main character still is a wizard, but also like so much of that book and that entire line is basically just like, yeah, but all of these regular non-wizard people all around deeply matter, are really important to experience the world, to moving through it, to the plot and the stuff going on. Like they're all like the world isn't just made out of the people with powers, magic powers. The world is also made out of the serving people, the guards, etc.
This is not really a fully realized thought, but I do think that this idea does touch to something that I feel like spiritually, like I feel like it is like kind of the fantasy version. Like, you know how people are like, you are what you eat, and like and that's, you know, trying to be like eat healthy or whatever. But to me, it's like, I guess the way that I see the world is like, you are everything that you consume. Like like I am this table, and like the book I read is like now a part of me, and like the way I like present and like come across to the world is like what has like come into my space. And so that I was very touched by this. I thought this was really cool, and this was like kind of like a fantasizing that idea that I have about like moving through the world, and like how you like impose your, I really liked how he used like specifically impose your will onto the world, because that's something that I think about pretty frequently, like how I change the things around me and now the things around me change me.
Yeah.
It goes back to that spiritual quality, right, of the three qualities, the way that each thing is connected to the things around it and to the people around it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's I think it's an Emerson quote. It's either Emerson or Thoreau. I should probably look it up, but I'm just going to say it. The quote is, I cannot remember the meals I have eaten any more than every book I have read. Even still, they have made me. Which I think is very
a good one.
In line of that thinking.
Whoever said it and whether or not it's accurate, it's a good one, and I share the sentiment.
It's relevant.
It is. Go ahead.
I wanted to talk about honesty versus dishonesty in this, because obviously forging, like to me, I was really kind of, when I like stepped back from this book, I was really digging into like, well, she learned honesty from Gautona. Like what she really loved about Gautona was his honesty. And in the end, the gambit that she made with the Emperor's Soul was obviously from the character, like from Gautona, from Gautona. Like he was the one who made her consider honesty and then put it into the Emperor's Soul. but like, but I'm still like trying to process it, because it's like, she didn't do something that was like, just because she chose the arbiter that she thought was the best, and she still chose an arbiter to be the right one. Like, just because he didn't come to her and was like, I think you should put in a backdoor for me, and then all the rest of them came in and were like, I want to put in a backdoor for, like, she did put in a backdoor for Galtona. That's kind of like the interesting, like, ethical, honest, because forgery in itself is dishonest, but she was so influenced by this honest guy that she then she dishonestly put this into the emperor. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
There's a really strange, like, back and forth here.
The scene you're talking about is just to give clarity to anyone listening who didn't read the whole story. Part of the quote unquote payment and how she would get out is she had these things called essence marks, which were basically soul stamps she designed for herself. Like the one that would turn
new
her
operating
into,
system.
Exactly. Like the soul stamp that would turn her into a warrior, the soul stamp that would turn her into a beggar, a soul stamp that would do X, Y. Like, just like it's various soul stamps that would that were useful. And then one that we'll get into later that was a little more involved. She needed both. They were her most prized possessions, so she couldn't leave without them. And also she needed them to escape. And she had this whole scene where when she was escaping, like when Zhu, the like captain of the guard, came to kill her, she relied on the fact that Galtona would be there to like have her essence marks and be willing to give them to her. And she had this whole thing where it's like, yeah, like I needed to manipulate this guy to like into doing this. But like I realized that the only way to manipulate him was to be authentic, was to let him see me being authentic and honest and all this stuff. And he like sort of recognizes that he got manipulated, but he also can't be mad since the way she manipulated him was by being honest and authentic. And then like, but you're right. But then like this new Emperor's Soul she made did have not really a back door, but did have changes to it. Like did have something that was not true to the original.
Yeah.
And what she decided to change was in large part influenced by Galtona's authenticity.
It's kind of a question of truth and what is a lie and what is a truth, right? I mean, in a story, there can be truth even if the story is fiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So truth is this more abstract notion. It's almost like truth itself has the physical and what are the three
cognitive,
elements? The spiritual,
physical,
cognitive, and spiritual
Absolutely.
elements. And that the spiritual truth is something slightly different than the actual objective truth.
Yeah.
And that she is channeling some greater truth in making the emperor true to himself. She's not lying in the way that, making him a different person. She is making him still true to himself and telling a sort of greater truth. And she identified in Galtona someone I think who would appreciate that. He's actually similar to a character in Dave. Among the many members of the president's cabinet, there's like the jerk who like wants Dave to do his bidding, and then there's the guy who's actually kind of cool.
That's Favre, the jerk.
Yeah.
What's I don't remember her name. The arbiter that wanted the back door.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's Frank Langella is playing that guy.
I was actually going to
Thinks
draw a
he can
comparison
rule.
since Kirk, you keep bringing up of like this sort of cinematic theory of Sanderson, as it were. This Taylor, you drawing attention to it. It does feel very Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, everlasting gobstopper in a way of like. All these people are trying to manipulate their way to success, and the only way to actually win is just to be like true and honest, and like thus you get the reward at the end, or that sort of thing.
That's true. It's a very classical kind of storytelling moral archetype.
Yeah. Not exclusive to that particular Roald Dahl story, but there is something... I do find this sort of gray area really fascinating in real life. There's a very famous painting that I'm sure we've all heard of called the Mona Lisa. There's a lesser-known painting that we probably all haven't heard of, which is the Isleworth Mona Lisa. It is a forgery, kind of. It is an exact copy painted by Da Vinci. She's slightly younger, and it's in a private collection. It's not on display anywhere that the public can go see. You can go see a Google image of it anywhere, but it looks almost exactly the same. And until recently, we weren't able to determine whether or not it was a student or a forgery, or it was actually painted by Da Vinci, and we think it was. And it's sort of a thing of like, well, why is this one less important? Why isn't this one in the Louvre, like right next to the Mona Lisa? And it's like, well, because it was painted second. It's not the original. And we as human beings have such an emphasis on the real thing. I also read a short story recently that I really, really liked in Amor Towles' A Table for Two, which is just a collection of short stories he's written over the year. And one is called the Di Domenico Fragment. And I would encourage anyone to read that whole collection, but that story in particular is about the forgery of a painting and like the restoration of an original painting and like who gets to see art and all of that. I was thinking about it a lot as we read this.
I want to flag off of that. I want to flag also an important point that's brought up in the book. Just this whole thing about being like the first, the original, etc. It's important to note, like I think we've said like restored the emperor a couple times. The emperor wasn't restored. The emperor is dead. The thing that's on the Rose throne right now is a new thing. Is a
True.
fully manufactured personality instead of memories and whatever. She didn't heal the emperor. She built a new one that just had all the same memories and stuff. And so I wonder if there's something more to be said about that, where it's like, and I think Gautona like thinks about it a little bit, like this isn't the emperor. Like the emperor is dead. But no one's supposed to know that, because if they knew it, even though it's effectively, it like is the same guy effectively, like the fact that it's not literally the original emperor, that's the whole problem. That's the whole secret they have to keep.
I do think that stories like this are going to become helpful in the age of artificial intelligence. I think a lot about the fact that there is a record of me. You know, I've recorded so many podcasts at this point, and so much of my writing is in the world that you could just feed into some, you know, large language model and it could turn it into Kirk mulch and then spit out a pretty convincing version of me. Today, they could do that. Like, it would sound like me. It would use a lot of my little isms. It would pause like I do. It would sing like I do. And that's a very strange thought, because it wouldn't be me, but it would be convincing. And then, you know, fast forward 30 years in the future, add 30 more years worth of podcasts, hopefully, you know, I die. And then are my nieces like loading up this version of me? It's not that dissimilar from what the emperor is. And yeah, as you describe him, I mean, he is not the same person. He's in the same body, but he is a different being. And then, you know, so what is the truth of that being? And it's something that we're all going to have to wrestle with in much the same way as the characters in this story.
Yeah.
My point about all this is like circling back to like interpretation, where like, I think, you know, you talked about Wes Anderson wanting to be this clear window. And I think that's what the forger has to be, is like, for creating this soul, it is her interpretation of the emperor's soul, but it's, you know, as clear a window as she could make it. She didn't want to be a part of, she was just trying to create his soul while taking herself out of it. And it's interesting to see, to bring AI into that, like because there is an interpretation somewhere that's some human made. And
the emperor was her interpretation too, right? I mean, even though she tried to remove herself from it, that's just this one instance. Broadly speaking, if everyone was doing this, like, the person making the forgery is certainly imposing themselves on the process.
Anyone who says AI is unbiased doesn't know what they're talking about. There's bias, even if sometimes it's more well hidden.
To go back to a slightly kinder interpretation of it, because I do think that, like, sure, like, now reading it, we now see this story and read the specter of AI and that sort of thing. But I do think I really like what you said, Kirk, of, like, the spiritual truth not being quite the same as the literal truth. And perhaps that's true of the Emperor, too. Of, like, this is not literally the same guy, but, like, spiritually, I think she captures some of that there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think mentioning AI, AI is interesting conceptually because it's something that we're all grappling with, and it brings a lot of these questions to the fore. But this question is a lot bigger than that, and it's not even like AI is always dicey just because people have very complicated and intense feelings about it. But this is also true of journalism. I mean, the journalistic truth is somewhat different from the objective truth. This is something that we ran into all the time when I was working as a journalist, is that you tell the story and you capture the truth as you learn it. You spend a lot of time talking to sources. You go to everybody, you get all the information that you can, and then you present to your audience the clearest version of what happened that you can. But that's not the same as like presenting every single bit of information or presenting this sort of overwhelming objective account of everything, because people don't synthesize information that way, and it's not actually an effective way to communicate. So you have to kind of get to the core of the story and then just earn the trust of your audience. And so, AI, of course, it all has a bias. Every AI has a bias, and it's a huge mistake to assume otherwise, just like every person has a bias. And when we talk about Shay making this this version of the Emperor, while we saw inside of her, she is this almost impossibly, clean person who removes herself from art at every step and is so principled, even she couldn't help but put herself into her creation, right? So it's always there. It's just a question of whose truth do we want to seek out, and then whose truths are going to be the ones that we run into in the world. And then I guess in this case, whose truths are going to be the emperor of the whole empire, which is kind of an important one.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, there is a really important part of her art, which was that during the times when she was creating the stamps, she was making tinier, smaller stamps and then practicing them on Gautona, which is like talking about, whose interpretation of the emperor. Well, she's kind of getting her objective facts, like the objective truth that she, could, because it is her interpretation, but she was wrong sometimes, and she had to use Gautona's soul as like a way to see like what the emperor's soul was going to be like.
She's like asking for comment. She's following up.
Yeah, and it's like, it is kind of Gautona's interpretation as well. Like, he could have withheld stuff. Yeah. He could have changed things in some way. It's both of them.
Oh, that just gave me a thought. And it's also, it's almost presented. So there's this whole idea of like, the better you got at understanding the history of whatever object you're standing, whatever seems the most plausible, that stamp is going to take for longer, because they have to like replace the stamps every once in a while. And if it's like a really implausible, like this, like to go back to a previous example, this table would never have been a frog. The stamp would disappear in like a second and never like actually take it. And she was almost using that as a metric. She was like, okay, Galdona is similar enough to the emperor and was in close enough proximity to him that like I'm going to use how well these stamps take to him as a measure of how correct I am. But I guess when talking about plausibility, we just talked about objects and souls having their own thoughts and opinions on things. So it's almost like it's Gautona's soul's opinion on what the most plausible like thing is and how well the stamp should be.
Does add a metaphysical layer to things.
It's like it's not actually an objective measure of how correct she got the history. It's still just opinion. It's still just perception.
It's funny. It really is a lot like reporting. My Triple Click co-host, Jason Schreier, of course, is this like really well-known reporter who writes all these books. And comparing one of his books, his recent book, he wrote this book about Blizzard. It's a great book. And it's like, he talked to 300 people or something. It's incredibly well-sourced. He did so much research, and you read it, and it does have the sort of inner consistency of a very sturdy thing that is close to the truth, compared to a story where, I don't know, you talk to one person, two people had a fight, you talk to one half of them, and then you publish a blog post that's like, this guy says this other guy's a jerk. And it's like, it flutters away in the wind. It's basically, it has no internal consistency whatsoever. And what she's doing here is kind of doing all the research and then also running the research by a primary source that's a really, trustworthy primary source. She is kind of doing journalism. I hadn't thought about that until this. This isn't to like put everything through the filter of what I know, but and maybe that's what I'm doing just because I know journalism. But it does actually.
The creative process is about observation. Samson just told us that.
And that's true.
And that's also something that no three of us would have brought to this conversation. I just think that's so cool.
Also, everyone go read Play Nice because it is really good. It comes endorsed by me and Taylor and also my dad, because my dad has inexplicably become a huge fan of Jason Schreier despite the fact he doesn't play video games.
That I think people who don't even care that much about video games can enjoy just because it's this great business story,
Oh my God, and that's the...
yeah, he's good.
So I've never heard of this book. I'm just Googling it for the first time.
Oh yeah, this is Jason's third. Jason Schreier, easily the most famous member of my other podcast.
Yes.
He is now a gaming celebrity. I was with him at GDC and everyone's like, Jason, hey man. I was like, oh man. You really made it.
Oh, he did Blood, Sweat, and Pixels.
Yeah. You've read his work before, for sure.
Yeah. I read Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, and I really liked it.
Oh, read Play Nice. It's quite. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels is great, but Play Nice. It's on another level.
Yeah.
I just found something else in my notes. He brings up in the postscript, I think, that, he got this idea from going to a museum in Taiwan and seeing that this put his own stamps and stuff on art that he liked. I was interested in the way that kind of implies this kind of shared possession. The emperor in Taiwan thinks that this is also his and can put, I guess, something on it. I was wondering if the way that idea of shared possession is, this table is shared, the table getting changed is the shared perception of all the people kind of owning it, right? There's kind of this strange ownership thing that doesn't really get translated. It does and doesn't get translated, I think, to the soul stamp magic system. Things are shared, but things are also, his soul is his soul. I don't know. It's weird. I was just
and
thinking that's so weird.
It is created by an individual. It's funny reading that postscript or afterword. I found the American artist part of me just losing his mind at the idea of some emperor just stamping something I made and being like, it's mine too, because this is my empire. And yet the concept is, it is sort of fundamentally anti-individualist, right? It's that you made what you made in the context of the society in which you live. The ruler of that society is therefore entitled to say that hey, he made it too. It's partly his, which is just a really interesting idea, that everything you make is a part of the context in which you made it, and that it can be considered more than just something that you made.
Thank you for taking my point and articulating it in a way that made sense. Yes,
Teamwork.
I was definitely getting at individualism in America, as an artist, and
Side note, you brought up the stamp thing, and I was trying to find the Wikipedia page for this stamp stuff, and I was going off of what Brandon Sanderson put in the postscript, which was the Korean name of I'm going to mispronounce this, Tojong, and I keep trying to look it up, and I just keep getting Korean soybean paste. So I don't know if that's
Something's
a
going on
phonetics,
there.
weird phonetic spelling he used, or that got mistranslated. But yeah, so just fun fact.
That does sort of just draw into one of the things that I thought about. It's a little weird that the guy writing the story is a white Christian, and he's doing a lot of sort of, not necessarily tokenizing, but he's writing an East Asian story. But also Sanderson seems to sort of avoid this criticism frequently. And I think part of the reason, obviously, experience does not translate to having been raised in Asia, but he lived there for several years, as he said in the postscript, and he speaks fluent Korean, which is still one thing that I think is just wild about him. Of just this random dude from Utah being yes, annyeonghaseyo. But
I think he does give the impression of someone that does have a lot of genuine respect and care for Korean culture and his experiences there.
Oh, absolutely. And to this point of, he makes the point of you can't take in all of Chinese art in the 4 hours we had at this museum, but how much of his work is operating on observation and respectful observation and understanding here, I think is something that really sort of works for it. To go back also to a little bit on the sort of individualism and that point of as an American, I hear the idea of someone else sharing credit for something that they didn't do, and I'm I don't like this all that much. But I do think another sort of interpretation is, while the emperor is adding to it, or adding his signature to it, it is sort of how any audience response is. As Kirk was saying earlier, once something is out in the world, it's not yours anymore. The audience is adding to their signature to it as well. I mean, I'm sure there are all of us have, in the grand scheme of things, very little fame. Even Kirk, who is much more successful than us, we have very little fame in the grand scheme of things. But imagine someone who made something as culturally big as and like with a fan base as engaged as something like a Homestuck or an Undertale or something like that, where there are entire sections of people who are not fans of the original work anymore, who are now just fans of the fan work, and that sort of thing. Of like, the response to that has gone so far beyond what the original artist was intending that it's not theirs
Especially
anymore.
if you consider Undertale as a work of Earthbound fan.
Yeah, of course.
I think there does actually exist a kind of comparison to something that we like, to this culture of like putting a stamp on it by the emperor that we currently kind of have, which is like reposts and retweets and like shit like that. Like, I don't know if that's too much of a stretch.
No, I mean, sharing art is definitely something that just unites a culture in all the different ways that we do it. I mean, or taking a work of art and reworking it yourself, or making a cover recording. I don't know. There are a lot of different versions of this. We sort of share art around, and in doing so, we put a little bit of ourselves on it. You know, anytime I recommend something to someone or talk to someone about an album that I love or a movie that I just saw, I'm also telling them something about myself. So I'm inserting myself into their appreciation of the art. And then when they go and they watch Hacks, because I told them Hacks is really good, they're like, oh yeah, and Kirk likes this show too. So this
or
tells
when
me
we all
something
go
about
watch
him.
Dave after this.
True.
Yes,
Yeah.
after all of your listeners go and watch Dave, thankfully they will now think of me. Just what I wanted.
On that sort of thought of like the endorsement of art of something like that, I mean, like, I have a bunch of tattoos. I'm not wearing the right kind of shirt, but I was about to show the great bit for a visual, for a non-visual medium is to describe my tattoos. But I have like an Obra Dinn tattoo, and like
Oh, nice.
I associate that with the game, and I associate the people who introduced me to that game, and that sort of thing like that, and also like. Yeah, whenever someone goes, oh, that's a cool stopwatch on your arm, and those are cool tentacles. What does that mean to you? It's like,
oh, nice.
it's this
That's
piece of
what it
art.
is. It's the watch. Oh, cool. I was wondering what it is.
I can send a photo of it. You know what? I'll put this in the show
sure.
notes too.
I thought it was strange that we got another story about a woman fixing an emperor.
It is kind of an I can fix him. Another I can fix him.
Like, it's like,
Oh, wait.
if I had a nickel for every time a woman fixed an emperor, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that happened twice.
Wait, I'm trying to think. What is the other story where a woman fixes
Warbreaker.
an emperor?
Warbreaker.
Oh, yeah, sure. Warbreaker. Okay. I was like,
I guess, like,
a lot
sort
these
of.
Beats, well, these beats are very familiar. Like, but,
Yeah.
It is funny to think of this that
the
way,
worst
since-
the worst would have been if Shai, like, in empathizing with the emperor, like, fell in love with him or something.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, geez. You know, here's a thought. I think that this story works really well because it's so short. As much as I have enjoyed Sanderson's longer works, I was really refreshed by the length of this story
yeah.
because it allows him to do everything that he does so well on a much smaller scale and without the sort of, I don't know, secondary characters that I just don't like as much. For example, I read The Way of Kings after this. Shallan, is that her name? Who's
Yeah,
off
Shallan,
studying.
yeah.
Man, I mean, respect
So
to
true.
her and everything. But like the whole time I'm reading the book, I'm just thinking, can we please get back to Kaladin? All I care about is this thing where they have to run this bridge and what the hell is going to happen. And then I'm like secondarily interested in the king,
Dalinar.
the brother of the dead king, because that's like Kaladin is at least there. They're in the same place, and I'm like, all right, this is all going to tie together in some cool way, and then it does. But every time we cut away to Shallan, I'm like, I know this will be important later. I'm not uninterested. There were some cool parts. I like when she's drawing this ghostly guys or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm always just thinking, can we please get back? Which is a kind of common thing with Sanderson. I don't mind the world building in a larger story, but in Mistborn, I just want to be with Vin. I just want to know what's going on with Vin. That is, especially when Vin is going undercover to the balls and stuff, that was this, like the book was cooking and that's where I wanted to be. So in his bigger stories, there's usually one smaller story that I'm most interested in. In this case, I was totally interested the entire time. And while there was a lot of magic to introduce, there are a lot of mechanics at first, which each time you start a new Sanderson, or at least each time I do, I find myself being like, okay. Kind of
So true.
because you're like, this
out
is
your
just going to
physics
be
textbook.
about 100 pages of front loading all of this stuff. And then I trust at this point that once we do that, it's going to get good. And it always does. But in this case, they front loaded the stuff pretty quickly, and then we could just go, and then we got to the big ending, and then it was over. So I actually really appreciated the length. I thought it really allowed him to do his thing very effectively.
Yeah.
It's so funny that you say this, Kirk, because we had this conversation right before you joined the call of like, I'm fully in your camp of like, I'm so glad this is short. And I think this is actually ranks really, really highly for me because it does everything I want from Sanderson in a shorter period of time. Whereas Jack and Taylor were more in the camp of part of the like grand scope of Sanderson is what I'm looking for. And even if there are huge sections of the book that the two of you aren't as huge on, there's still more there that you found that you were like lacking in Emperor's Soul. But honestly, I think this is one of the best things he's ever written. It's so clean.
To put the point another way is like it feels odd, for example, to try and rank Emperor's Soul, like if we're ranking our favorite stuff, rank Emperor's Soul higher than Way of Kings, because even if I was comparing like just pure writing quality, I think Emperor's Soul is better. There's just so much more in Way of Kings. Like Way of Kings is like it. There's a little bit of quantity like supplementing the lack of quality, I guess, that makes it like kind of difficult for me to feel like it's like a fair comparison.
They're very different. It's true.
There's a great video from Rasputin, who's a like video games video essayist. I think he's most famous for making a video with his wife several years ago. It was like, what are video games like for someone who doesn't play video games? That sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, I remember that video.
And he made a video recently called The Best Games Are Kind of Bad. The actual point that he's articulating is he was like, I really liked Tears of the Kingdom, which is weirdly becomes kind of controversial, and at least on certain forms of online spaces. The point he's making is like, I think it's really, really flawed in a lot of ways. There's a lot of mechanics that don't work for me, but it's so ambitious and it's so successful that comparing it to something that does many of the same things, like, for example, A Short Hike, which I think is very much in conversation with Breath of the Wild and that sort of thing, which is like half an hour and basically perfect, it feels very silly to compare these things. And, you know, I'm honestly in the camp of like, I do think A Short Hike is kind of more successful in some ways, but...
I'm going to quibble with that, saying that it feels silly to compare them. I think if you're living in a world where it actually matters which one you say is better, like
sure,
there's some actual gladiatorial combat going on between different video games, and somehow the winner gets something that the loser doesn't, like maybe. But I think comparing the two works is incredibly useful and interesting.
Yeah,
comparing
of course.
A Short Hike to Breath of the Wild is a very interesting thing to do, and it tells you something about games and about each individual game and how you feel about them. Just like comparing this to something like Way of Kings is also a very interesting comparison, like just for all the reasons that I think we've gone over. Like they're incredibly different. This kind of focuses Sanderson in a way that is actually really instructive for me. It's really informative.
Mm-hmm.
Graham, you gotta finish the point. I thought that I was very struck by the 7.
Oh, there was
point.
just a very interesting response to that where someone described it as, I think A Short Hike is a perfect 7 out of 7 game, whereas Tears of the Kingdom might be a 7 out of 10.
That's a very clever response, but I think I get what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I appreciate your insight
so
there.
much. Yeah.
That's good.
Were there any points we put down in our notes that we feel we haven't like touched on or didn't get a chance to really dig into? We did end up talking about the prologue stuff at the earlier beginning. I'm not sure there's much else to say that we haven't already said in other podcasts about please listen to your editors.
I would say there's two things that I kind of want to bring up. One is, it's so interesting to see, to go back to the Cosmere a little bit, right at the beginning of the book, we see Shai trying to escape her prison, and she has to figure out the kinds of rocks that are all around her prison, because she has to transform each one individually and all these different things, and it'd be a really complicated spell to cast, essentially. Because, of course, she has to know the history of each individual object. But then when she's sort of making her big bluff to the Arbiters of, like, I could have turned this all into exploding rock and then melted the Ralkalest out the outer edge, the unchangeable metal. There's a moment where she's describing it and how it works, and where Gautona replies to like, well, that metal still needs like a forge to get hot enough to melt. And I realized they're describing aluminum.
Ralkalest is aluminum.
Yeah, that's the metal that, like, of course, in Mistborn prevents the powers, and in Stormlight, I think we've only heard the mention of this, but, like, it interacts with some of the magic systems in that, where, like, it causes them not to work as well and that sort of thing.
I'm trying to find it. I could have sworn because the word raucalist will come up again as like another name for aluminum. I could have sworn that like raucalist had like some kind of real world origin as like an old timey or different culture's word for aluminum. So like theoretically you could have picked up just from the name, but I'm having a hard time like finding that. I could have sworn
You might be
I, like,
confusing
read that
it with
somewhere.
a different metal because bendalloy in alloy of law is like an old-timey term for like a real metal that has a different name that we use today. Like there's a different industry term, but if you were like an old-timey Wild West person, you would call it bendalloy, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But I
So it
just
does
wanted
look
to
like
say,
raucalist is just a Sanderson made up word.
sure, there are plenty of those. That's the stuff I like the most of seeing his sort of recombinant works and his like reoccurring Cosmere thing of like, oh, the video game mechanics are consistent. That's kind of cool. That's fun to me. I think the other one that works really well is I like how much better the essence marks worked for me than they feel like the gold burning being an augur in Mistborn, where Vin burns the gold and she sees the Mistborn version of herself, and then she sees like the less important version of herself in something like that. And like this is a similar sort of theme, and it really works for me because this is something that Sanderson returns to over and over again of like, what might you have been under different circumstances? Because like that's a lot of the juice of Kaladin, of like, what would Kaladin be if not for the tragedies that happened to him? Would he be a surgeon? Would he still be a warrior? Would he have sought to protect his little brother? What would Vin have been if not for the Final Empire? Would she just have been, or if she had been born slightly better or something like that? And then, of course, in Alloy of Law, which the sequel series to Mistborn, which I don't think you've read, Kirk.
No.
There's a character in there called Miles 100 Lives, and he's a, in the same way that the Lord Ruler can compound atium. It's a good name. Can compound atium to extend his life. Miles can compound gold, so he can just be constantly healthy. So someone can shoot him.
Healing.
He is Wolverine healing. So someone can shoot him and he
sick.
instantly heals. It's a cool premise, but because he can burn both gold as a Feruchemist and as a Misting, there's a scene where he does it as well, and he sees himself as like the cop he used to be and the criminal he is now. And all of that, like, generally I don't think is as strong, except for maybe Kaladin's, as these essence marks, where we get to really sort of dig into the history of like what choices you could have made that actually would have changed you in this way. And it just feels really, really strong to me.
Yeah.
She had to dig back to the time where she thought that her like life branched. But like then she's talked about how like, well, life doesn't really branch that way. It's more of like a step off the road and then another step, and then you find yourself in the middle of the woods and you don't know where you are.
It just gave me a thought that like a gold misting would be a really good forger. They'd be really good at this whole forgery thing.
Probably.
Yeah, that's true. Like the one Brandon Sanderson character who has access to every single ability and how they might inform one another. I like that we just see those marks and her kind of fully rebuild herself at the very end. A lot of times Sanderson will introduce us to things. He just throws you in the deep end, and then you're almost playing detective for the first 100 pages of the book as you just, okay, I'm going to figure this out. Oh, I see. Now this does this and this does this and this is how it works. That he establishes all the rules and then finally gives you this kind of really clean and beautiful actualization of that idea at the end. And we really get to see how it works. We've already learned how forgery works, so he can keep it really tight. Like she just drops the stamp on herself and we get the whole thing, and then it's all just really fun to watch the story and the people she trained with and her whole backstory and the way that her life took this path, and we already understand all the mechanics, so it's pretty much just flavor, I guess, at that point, which is I really liked that about that part.
I mean,
I guess we didn't mention she also has the stamp that's going to erase everything, right? Which I think is another kind of tantalizing and interesting idea that they introduce.
She has a stamp that will like do the whole rewriting history, memories things to basically turn her into a version of herself that never became a forger, was just a simple farm girl that like lived out and never wanted to leave, and like basically just like the escape from her current life. Like the escape, a stamp that would make her escape from her current life and just become a simple nobody out in like rural Rose Empire.
I mean,
and then that's always a temptation for her, that she's created it just in case, because maybe this is all horrible and I shouldn't have done it.
And I mean, it's a very in-genre thing of how often do you encounter like a super heroic or like a fantastic character who the only thing in the world they want to do is retire. And like I just found it like, yeah, it's particularly resonant and sweet. I like the note of like she's going to fold Galtona into her new conception of that as well, of like a kindly grandfather. I mean, another thing on that line of thinking that is really brief is she keeps referring to these family members that she has that don't exist. Like her uncle is not, like she admits at one point, is a fake person.
Right. And this is also referring like internally, like in her own like internal monologue, not just like her lying to people, like lying to herself as well.
Yeah. And that one I have less of an idea of what to do with. I would love to sit with it longer, but I am not entirely sure what he's doing there. But I do think it's like, it's effective. It works on the page.
Yeah. And it's a strength of the brevity of this story that you can want to pick over or spend that much time with any one concept in this story. I do feel like in this conversation we've covered pretty much everything, which is a good feeling. Where in his larger stories it's just there's so much going on that it just feels like you just can't even possibly do it even in a two-parter, right?
Yeah.
Every time we do a podcast, every time we finish recording, we spend the next couple weeks going into this chat and being like, shit, I wish I brought up this.
Oh yeah, right. Which is I guess inevitable with anything, because there's both the art itself and then there's the infinite things that you could say about it. But it is nice that I think each of these ideas really feels pretty thought through, and then they all exist in this context that is small enough you can get your arms around it, and then each idea is kind of in conversation with the other ideas, because it's really just about this one character and then this other character that serves as a kind of reflection back to her, and that's really it. And that's just something that I really liked about this story.
One last little thing that's sort of related is, I think something that we see a lot in Sanderson, and this is a little related to the Gold Augur stuff as well, of we see Sanderson do, "You're not so different, you and I," or often sometimes a character...
My least favorite lines of dialogue.
I know.
Drink whenever I hear someone say that.
And thankfully he's tactful enough to not have characters say that literally, but they do basically that anyway. Or when it's done a little more subtly and a little more thoughtfully, it's like, oh, am I like that? Which I think is the more resonant version of that. And here, the fact that all of it has to be empathy and understanding makes that sort of trope work for me in a way that it really doesn't when I most see it. We actually get to see it through the unpacking of the magic system and the character work, and it's never commented on. It's just like, oh, there are similarities here. And we don't need to draw attention to it. We can just sort of observe.
Yeah, that's true. It's so baked into the framework of the story and the magic system.
Yeah. As you said, Kirk, we're sort of getting to the end here. Does anyone else have any like broad points they definitely want to hit before we do our rankings?
Yeah, I was going to say, Kirk's not allowed to leave until we hear those rankings. I'm really excited about that.
Okay.
I've
got it worked out. It's a little bit loose. I'm kind of reworking it here, but I can do my own ranking.
That's totally fine.
Are we doing that now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. This is my new number one. It beats out Hero of Ages, and I think it's only because of what we were talking about of its length and like how tight and clean it is. This is not necessarily my favorite Sanderson book. It's not necessarily the stuff that has the best scenes in it. For example, like I cried at the end of Hero of Ages because I'm a little bitch, but I did not cry reading Emperor's Soul. I found it very moving during sections of it, but I didn't cry. So it's not necessarily my favorite, but I do think this is the reflection of the best that Sanderson can do.
Nice.
I put it at number 5, behind Way of Kings, Warbreaker, Mistborn 1, and Hero of Ages. And I think it really is just that bias we were talking about. Like when I think about, Emperor's Soul, I agree. I think he's at his best almost all the way through this Emperor's Soul. I think this really is like he's really, really cooking. He really knows what he's doing. I mean, hell, it's the only thing he's ever won. It's one of the only things he's ever won like a real award for. He got a Hugo Award for Emperor's Soul in 2013, which I don't remember if we mentioned. But I think there's just that bias of just like there's just so much more to find and like in Way of Kings just because of its like size. And I think just personally, I'm having a hard time getting over that like length bias, because like Way of Kings and Mistborn 1, those are the starts to like huge series, and like Hero of Ages is the end to a huge series, and like it's like there's a lot more like weight of context and nostalgia like behind those books compared to Emperor's Soul, which I think is definitely influencing my decision.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think to me, comparing Emperor's Soul and comparing something that's novel length is kind of like comparing a song to like a symphony. And like, I can't, the buildup is really important to me. And like all of that time we spend with the characters makes me feel so in touch and so close to them that I can't, like, just because there's only 100 pages, like I couldn't grab all the way on. But like a song, you can reread it more easily over and over again. But yeah, I'm number one champion of Warbreaker. That is my, I love Warbreaker. I love Warbreaker so much. Like, it was my favorite just general fantasy that I had like read last year. Even for this, podcast and stuff. But so Emperor's Soul's is on my 6 for me. We've got Warbreaker, Hero of Ages is number 2. Alcatraz versus the Scrivener's Bones is number 3. And then The Way of Kings, Mistborn, and then The Emperor's Soul. And it's above Alloy of Law. That was fair. Better than Alloy of Law. And then the rest, we don't have to talk about.
Everything below that point, yeah.
Okay, so I've read 8 Brandon Sanderson books, novels and novellas, and I'll just rank them because what the hell? Some of them you haven't talked about on the show.
That's fine.
That's fine.
But this ranking I just came up with before this episode, and then kind of tweaked a little bit here. It's just kind of going on vibes. I'm going to say number 1 is Mistborn 1. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy that book, even if the whole trilogy it's lost me a little bit. Like over time, it just kind of wanders away. That first book really rocks, and I like The Matrix too. So hey, it's such a cool magic system. I think it was the 3rd book of his that I read, and while there was action in Warbreaker and Elantris, in Mistborn, these fight scenes he's writing are just unreal. I was like, this dude likes anime, and
yes.
I feel like I'm watching an anime, and so I was there for the fights, if nothing else.
God, I want the Castlevania studio to do Mistborn so bad.
That would whip ass. And am I correct, by the way, we haven't talked about this, but that there have been no adaptations of his work into a visual media?
The closest thing we have to an adaptation of Sanderson is Infinity Blade 2 and 3.
Oh, right, sure. Of course, there's Infinity Blade.
Because the novellas that he wrote, that he wrote are the plots of 2 and 3.
Right.
I think Sanderson has been talking about an adaptation being in the works at various stages for like a decade at this point. It's one of those things that...
I read an interview at Polygon, I think, about that.
It's one of those things where he's constantly trying to make work, but then is just never like actualized for one reason or another.
Mistborn in particular is the furthest that's gotten along. Sanderson talked about in his State of Sanderson, which is a like big yearly blog that he puts out about like everything that's going on. And in the adaptation section, he said that he got as far into production that they were doing pre-production for the Mistborn movie. Like names had gotten attached to it. They had built a mist cloak and like a physical prop and were doing screen tests with it. And then they pulled out. So that movie's not happening, and he's allowed to talk about it, the fact it's not happening.
And he is like very skeptical, right, of people adapting his work. That was the sense I got. I might be misremembering that, but yeah, that doesn't want people to screw it up.
He's skeptical of other. I think he wants to be involved. Like,
that makes sense.
He's not just going to hand it off to like just some people and just be like,
you could just imagine like Mistborn could go wrong so many ways. Like if, like you mentioned in this cloak, if they just get that one thing wrong and it looks stupid, then the whole thing is over and sucks. And like there are just so many things like that you could imagine. Plus, you'd need a $1 jillion to do those fight scenes unless it was animated.
That's the thing of like it works so much better to me in like the style of a Castlevania studio, because in live action I can only see it going the way of like a very bad 2000s fantasy adaptation, like your Aragons, that sort of thing.
Right. And then you run into with Mistborn, or because you'd want to do the whole trilogy, and then you run into that problem that so many of these streaming adaptations run into, where they get greenlit, they do one season, then the second season isn't as good and no one watches it, and then it gets canceled and you don't even get to see the whole adaptation. Where at least like Lord of the Rings, for example.
Unfortunately, so far Sanderson seems committed to Mistborn being live action.
He said recently that he's more willing to change it up. But
And it's funny. Oh, and isn't there a board game or something? A tabletop Mistborn game? So maybe he's down with that kind of adaptation.
yeah, there's a tabletop Mistborn game, which we probably should play at some point.
You should. It's interesting.
Recently, a full Cosmere like TTRPG was released.
Oh, that also makes sense.
Yeah.
He's so good at rules, especially Mistborn. I mean, it's so about, systems and counters and all these complex layered rules that it really lends itself to like a, strategy tabletop game. So I think that could be cool.
We'll almost certainly play like a one shot of that at something and at some point and record it.
Probably. Anyway, but we're interrupting your rankings, Kirk.
No, whatever. That's the fun of these things. So I guess that's what I've got at number 1. I'm putting Emperor's Soul at number 2. I think it's the tightest story of all of these. It's got the most interesting ideas. It certainly resonates with me just as an artist and as someone who thinks about my art and what it says about me and the truth and all this stuff we talked about. I mean, I think this was a great conversation and that kind of reflects the quality of the work. So Emperor's Soul at number 2, putting Warbreaker at 3. Taylor, I also love Warbreaker. I really liked that story in the end. It was the first one that I read. I didn't know what to expect. And it was just like a really neat story. It had so many cool ideas, this talking sword, this like, the whole, what is it called? Chroma...
Biochroma,
chromatic breast, biochroma. The biochromatic magic system was just really cool. It was a great introduction to him. I think it was a Polygon article actually that was like, here are the books to read to get into Brandon Sanderson. And I said, okay, article. And the first one was Warbreaker, and I read it, and I still think fondly of that story. Also, the gods in that, just the whole
really fun.
There were so many cool ideas. I still can really vividly picture many of the characters and elements of that story. So then at number 4, I've got Way of Kings, which I did like. It's kind of fresh. It dragged a little bit. There are only so many times I need to see like Kaladin and his guys suffering. He really gets into the suffering. I think I have Elantris a little further down. And in those 2 books, there's quite a bit of just the good guys going through it over and over and failing and trying to do something and then they fail. But then it is that much more satisfying when they pull it off. And I feel like in Way of Kings, while I haven't read the rest of the Stormlight Archive, or at least that series, it feels like he's learned lessons from Mistborn. Am I right that this was written after Mistborn?
Yes.
Is that right? Or at least published? Okay. It feels as though Mistborn was really killer, that first novel, and then he wasn't totally sure what to do with it, but wanted to keep writing. And I believe he's talked about, right, like he thought about making it a standalone and then decided to expand it later. Mm-hmm. Which, again, similar to The Matrix, even though I have things that I like about the second 2 Matrix movies, it does have that same feeling where the first one whips ass and the second 2 you're like, all right, you lost the plot a little bit here.
And then the fourth one whips ass again. So
yeah, I do love the newest one. So anyways, Way of Kings feels to me like it is setting up something that will be more satisfying. Like Shallan, as much as I thought her storylines, or Shallan, however you pronounce it, as much as I thought her storyline was kind of went nowhere and I didn't really get it, it does seem clear that she is being put in place for, further storytelling. And I like that. I like that he's keeping his powder dry and sort of not giving us everything in the first book and pacing it out. So anyways, Way of Kings at number 4, then Hero of Ages, which, like I said, I'm kind of like not wild about the later Mistborn stuff, but as you've mentioned, I do love the ending of Hero of Ages.
The ending is so good.
Who turns out to be the Hero of Ages? I found that to be, really beautiful, and like I loved it. I didn't see it coming at all, and it really turned me around on the whole book, and really the whole books 2 and 3. I was like, oh well, this is a great ending. So hey, like, goes to show, nail your conclusion, and people will think the whole thing was good. And then Elantris after that. Elantris is cool, but a little, I don't know. There was just something a little unsatisfying about it to me, and a little all over the place.
It's very first book.
And a little awful, I think. There's a lot of awful suffering in that book that's like pretty brutal. Just people who can't die, who just suffer in eternal agony. I was like, Jesus, like, this is pretty bleak. So anyways, but I still liked it well enough. Then Well of Ascension.
Let's go.
Classic middle child. I just don't remember it that well. Maybe if I reread it, I would.
That's
like
probably
you
for the best.
Yeah, we actively hate it on this podcast. Like,
oh really?
It's not that we like don't remember it. Like, we like actively are like, that was so bad.
Is it Well of Ascension where what's his name, the emperor becomes magic? Like he gets magic? Is that
Yep.
where that
Elend.
happens?
Yep. End of that book.
Yeah.
We're also
Yeah,
Elend
Elend
haters. I don't know.
He needed to be a Xander or a Sokka. He needed to be a non-magic dude.
Yeah.
We did not need him to become another bender. Another Mistborn.
Wizard. A wizard. We've just been saying
A
wizard.
wizard.
Wizard is probably best. So anyways, yeah, I just don't remember it that well. And then last I'm putting Tress of the Emerald Sea. Sorry, Tress. Just kind of it's fun. It feels weird to put such an inoffensive story at the end because in some ways it really is inoffensive. And I enjoyed seeing Sanderson stretch because he's doing the whole narrators constantly like nudging you and interjecting thing that Goldman did in The Princess Bride, or that's somewhat present in the movie as well. And then, of course, doing that consciously. And I think there's a really sweet story behind it. It just kind of didn't do much for me. And it just reminded me of how much I love The Princess Bride, especially the novel The Princess Bride.
The novel rules.
A fabulous read. I love it.
Yeah.
And, it was like, oh, okay, you're doing a Princess Bride thing, but I could just be reading The Princess Bride right now. So anyways, I just put it at the bottom because it didn't make a super strong impression on me.
Yeah.
I like that.
So there we go.
Well, Kirk, thank you so much for coming on the show. I imagine everyone who's listening to this has heard of you, but do you want to plug your things?
Sure. I make 2 podcasts. One is called Triple Click, and it's about games and also the weather and books and whatever. I don't know, but it's mostly about games. I make that with Maddie Myers and Jason Schreier, who we have mentioned. And then really my main thing is a music podcast called Strong Songs that I make that I'm very proud of. I've been making it for coming up on 6 years, and it's a sort of music explainer show. I take songs that people know and I take them apart and put them back together again. I explain how all the parts work. It's pretty approachable. There's a lot of music theory, but it's also kind of anyone can listen if you just want to hear new things in your favorite songs. That's what it's all about. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. I don't get to talk about books at length on podcasts very often, so it was a real pleasure.
Yeah, I figured you would have insight. Ever since you talked about Elantris, I could feel a little bit through the listening feed of Kirk wants to talk to someone about this so badly
for another couple hours.
No, but thank you so much for being on. This was fantastic.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
This was such a cool.
Maybe whenever we encounter the next Sanderson book that's also about the creative process, we'll ask if you want to come back.
Yeah, sure. Let me know. I'd love to come back.
Well, all right. We will be coming back momentarily for the listener, but Kirk is going to be saying goodbye. We'll be coming back with Legion, the first of Stephen Leeds. I was about to say Stephen King. The first of his Stephen Leeds books. But once again, Kirk, thank you so much for being on here. It's weird because I guess I can do the our sign off of grab a book and hit the beach, but we're about to come right back. So
Yeah.
I will grab a book and I will hit the beach.
Exactly. Thank you.
Awesome.
Nice.
Amazing.
All right. Let's stop this recording and export. All right. Should we just jump into it?
Yeah, I had lots of fun notes for Soul. I have no notes for Legion.
I
was crazy.
I read that book in almost a single sitting and was just like, you know what? This might as well be happening. This might as well be a thing I'm reading.
I read it in a fugue state as an audiobook on my way on a drive up to Philadelphia. And I think that is the way to enjoy this book. I guess we're back. This is the most insane book we've ever read.
It's this to me Sanderson surgically opened up his brain, took a piece, slapped it all over the page. That's what it is. It's truly a window into this man.
That's the thing. I think it's really instructive. To Taylor's point of you said that your one sentence summary is the same for this one of Sanderson is out of his slop era. Yeah. Basically. And I do think that's true because the text itself and the writing of it is perfectly cromulent. It's everything you would expect from Sanderson and his style. Just the things that happen in it and the vibes are rancid.
So true. It's written well. He cares about it in the way that I don't think he cared about his last few books or the last few things that we've read of his. It's fucking crazy, though.
It's deeply personal.
Insane.
Before we get into the summary, listeners, audience, those of you who have been following us and reading along with Brandon Sanderson, he's been writing all this big fantasy stuff, Fantasy Heights, Metal Magic, Crab People Wars, etc., right? I want you to imagine what this man would write if he was going to write a story about terrorism in the Middle East.
That's deeply autobiographical. Deeply.
Should we just get into it? What are our one sentence summaries? We have Taylor's. Jack.
I don't fucking know.
Okay, then I'll do mine. My one sentence summary for Legion is upper class Harry Dubois proves the existence of God with nothing but his wits in time travel. This is extremely. What if Disco Elysium sucked and was super Mormon?
What if Disco Elysium, but like Islamic terrorists were involved?
God, this may be the single most 2012 piece of art ever made.
I would have believed if this is what he wrote after 9/11.
The cold open to the story is hearing gunshots across the wall, and he walks in and there's a guy taking shots at a picture of Osama bin Laden who had been dead for how many years? It's
barely
crazy.
Won.
It's the craziest
barely
fucking
won.
book ever.
When this book was written, barely won.
Okay, let me just do the summary because we have to do this. Okay, this is going to be one of our longest summaries ever, despite this book only being an hour-long audiobook. So
100 pages. Yeah.
Here we go. Legion follows a young man named Stephen Leeds, a man with hallucinations, his disorder is notably never named, that give him superpower-like abilities to solve crime. The story begins with Mr. Leeds being woken up by one of his hallucinations, a Navy SEAL combat expert named JC, shooting a photo of Osama bin Laden in his bedroom. After talking to his hallucination into giving him the gun, Leeds refuses to take a fake case from a grad student who really just wants to study his disorder. Stephen opens his mail, finding a mysterious black and white photo of the lone cypress when it was a young tree, a photo that should not be possible as the tree was already old when the camera was invented. To get to the bottom of this mystery, Leeds consults several of his various other personalities. Tobias, an older black man with a soothing voice who's an expert on history, theology, and philosophy. Ivy, Mr. Leeds' psychiatrist and general advisor. Audrey, a handwriting and cryptography expert described as curvy. Several days later, he is sent a photo of George Washington shaving in a similar style of photograph with a phone number on the back. Mr. Leeds consults Armando, a photography expert who believes himself to be the deposed emperor of Mexico. Yes, every single aspect of Mr. Leeds is a stereotype based on a famous actor. This book is insane.
Wait, I did not know that.
Tobias is supposed to be Morgan fucking Freeman.
Checks the fuck
Please,
out.
okay, we keep going, please.
Ivy is supposed to be Gwyneth Paltrow.
I cannot take any time processing that. We need to move on. I will scream if I take any time to think about that.
Armando declares the photos to be legitimate, and the group calls the number. Monica, a black woman who works in corporate security, answers and comes to Mr. Leeds' home. Monica tasks Stephen with recovering a stolen camera that can take photos of the past, invented by a Filipino scientist named Dr. Razon. Stephen is reluctant to take on the case, but when Monica reveals they have photos of Sandra, a mysterious woman from Leeds' past who taught him about his disorder, he agrees to help. After a cursory investigation of Razon's home, where they find a copy of Dawkins' The God Delusion with annotations and rebuttals in the margins, they figure out he's a true believer in Christ and traveled to Jerusalem to prove the resurrection of Christ true once and for all. Stephen reads a book of Hebrew and manifests a translator named Kalyani, a woman from India who specializes in translation and linguistics, on the flight to Israel and occupied Palestine. Monica explains that even when making duplicates, only Razon could get the camera to function properly. The group arrives in Israel and immediately go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Leeds talks to an Israeli police officer named Moshe, named for Moshe Feder, Sanderson's longtime editor. Moshe describes an Asian man who took photos of the church with the flash on, even in broad daylight, and didn't care if anyone got in the way of his camera shots. Stephen meets back up with Monica, and the two of them have a conversation about how the camera means the end of privacy, and they philosophize about how it could be used. Their conversation is interrupted by a car bomb. This book is fucking crazy. Leeds wakes up in prison by members of the real-world terrorist organization Abu Sayyaf, a real-world terror organization insurgency focused on Muslim separatism in the Philippines, to dramatically oversimplify a complex history. The group is led by a man named Salik, who claims to be a member of the Moro National Liberation Front, a different real-world Muslim political organization group in the Philippines. Salik promises Leeds payment and freedom if he agrees to help get the time travel camera working, either by getting the information from Razon, who is revealed to be working with Abu Sayyaf, in a failed attempt to escape for freedom and get out of the thumb under corporate control. All of this real-world context is explained by Tobias, who reveals that Salih's ultimate plan is to use the camera to prove true the Islamic faith, or at the very least prove Christianity false, so that the Philippines will be destabilized and Abu Sayyaf can take control in the subsequent religious war. Leeds and Razan have a brief conversation, with Leeds trying to rescue them both. Salih grows suspicious of the conversation and orders the men to beat Razan so that either Leeds or Razan capitulates. Razan steals a gun to bait one of the guards into killing him, committing suicide by police officer, and making sure that the secrets of the time travel camera die with him. JC, remember that Navy SEAL from earlier who's a hallucination, helps Stephen with his gun to kill the remaining members of Abu Sayyaf with the help of an escaped Monica. Leeds briefly examines Razan's body and finds broken glass in his jacket pocket. One of the members of Abu Sayyaf is revealed to have survived his wounds and uses a grenade to suicide bomb the room. Stephen barely manages to escape the room, saving part of the camera prototype. A month later, an injured but recovering Stephen meets with Monica, who offers him a job rebuilding the camera. He refuses on moral grounds. Monica gives the last photo of the camera ever took, a photo of a man posed for the camera 2,000 years ago, heavily implied to be Jesus Christ, proving to Leeds, at least, a Christian himself, the existence of God. We cut to a scene of Stephen manifesting a French expert in physics named Arnaud, as he explained that he saved the camera's flash, as the camera was actually completely ordinary, and he realized from the broken light bulb in Razan's pocket that the lighting was where the magic happened.
And JC, the Navy SEAL who saved him and guided his aim, JC, Jesus Christ, anyway, I rest my case.
Oh, you're so right, bestie. You are. This book has the audacity. This book has the audacity of a fucking insane person.
I want to point out that the book does take a second to go like, there's no way to verify this photo is actually Jesus. And even if it is, it might just be the historical person rather than like literal like proof of anything religious. But it also tells us that despite this being a flash into the past, Jesus is looking right at the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, he knew.
He knew. And he's like vaguely smiling. And also, the thing that's important to know is the book does make sure to tell us that we can't be for certain. This is what Monica says, but Stephen's reaction is like serenity and quietness, implying that he's like, I know that this is my God. Because earlier in the book, he's like, I'm a Christian, by the way.
Oh.
No, and also, like,
my
fucking... I really want to clarify, just because it's so crazy, just like how his, like, power is like, the whole idea is that he is an ordinary guy, but he has these, like it's almost like he absorbs, like, information, compartmentalizes it into a very, very, like, realistic to him hallucination, like, very real to him hallucination, that's actually the expert. Like, he learns Hebrew, but he doesn't actually learn Hebrew. He gets a hallucination that knows Hebrew.
It's honestly very Disco Elysium. I was not making a joke there. For those of you who haven't played Disco Elysium,
I have not.
It's great. The premise that I say to people who don't know Disco is Disco Elysium is like the Pixar movie Inside Out, but as a detective story. So you can consult all these different fragments of your personality to solve crimes. It's worth knowing that Disco comes out 7 years after this book is released, but they go about things. I'm not accusing anyone of ripping off anyone. Disco is way more in conversation with Planescape Torment than it is this book, but like similar premise of like the detective who can consult these fragments of himself. It's bad. It's real bad.
And because there's so much in this about like mental health and psychological like issues and disorders, it doesn't name what his disorder. I mean, it's like some kind of made up fantasy disorder, but like it does repeatedly mention the things it's not. It's not DID. It's not schizophrenia.
I mean, disorder is being an author. Can we be honest? Are we
Yeah.
allowed to say that?
Yeah.
So disorder is having a bunch of characters in your brain that keep talking to you all the time. And like, I can relate. Like, no, I get it. I see that. It's autobiographical.
They're real enough to him that he insists, like when they take a plane to Jerusalem, like they need a bunch of extra empty seats for the aspects he chose to bring along. And also, the funniest part to me about how like the hallucination thing works is like, there's a moment where they could really use an engineer, and Monica, the woman with him, is like and like he mentions like the aspect of him that's an engineer, and it's like a brilliant engineer. And she's like, well, why don't you like summon him? Why don't you use him? And he's just like, that's not how it works. I left him back in the States. He's not here.
I think the preface to this is truly one of the most instructive things we've ever read. Because, I mean, really, the method is paying off. Because I think that these two books that we've read back to back are the two most... These books tell you the most about Sanderson of anything we've ever read.
Mm.
Emperor's Soul, for better. This one, for worse.
I was just saying that Emperor's Soul and Legion are super comparable because they're of comparable length.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Okay, here's the preface. Psychology as superpower is a recurring theme in my works. I've always believed that the personality traits that make us each distinctive, the way we process information, the way we motivate ourselves, the way we shelter our psyche from the bad while learning to cherish the good, can either be our greatest strengths or our most dramatic limitations. How you see yourself, along with how you see what you have, is often more important than the talents, skills, or even supernatural abilities. That said, no series I've written has explored this idea more explicitly than the Legion stories. I began the first half of what would become 3 novellas, all of which were collected in this volume back in 2011. The premise was simple. What if a man's hallucinations proved beneficial to him in his life rather than the typical distraction? What followed wasn't truly an exploration of any real psychological phenomenon, but instead a look at how different facets of our personalities influence the way we interact with the world. It also proved to be a great deal of fun. Part action-adventure, part comedy, part near-future science fiction. Over the years, I couldn't leave Stephen Leeds alone. He also, I'm going to skip over some of this. They were cathartic to write, welcome breaks from other projects, in some ways the most personal stories I've ever done. The third one in particular.
Can't wait till we get to... Also, hey, we were talking about conversation with Emperor's Soul. He can't bring the aspects if he didn't bring them with him. We were just talking Emperor's Soul. It's all about plausibility, man. It's all about convincing himself that he brought the aspect and that they could be there.
I love that the disorder requires like a real world consistency, like it's a magic system. And you know what? I'm sure it is. That's the thing. It wouldn't be Disco where it's like this is a man who is unwell and but in doing so he's unlocking like a different layer of the world.
Can't wait to... What's the woman's name? Sandra?
Sandra, yeah. There's a woman...
Yeah, he's going to meet Sandra. It's going to be a Jason Moffat, Jekyll and Hyde moment where it's part of some secret government program to give people superpowers.
I mean, who knows? It's very possible it goes that way. But, like, based on how truly insane this book is, I have no idea what to anticipate next. This is what's fascinating. For those of you listeners who are here to like read the good books and like get analysis of those, thank you for listening. We deeply appreciate you. For those of you who are here just to understand Sanderson, read this. I don't think it's good. In fact, I think this is worse than Well of Ascension. I have a new top and a new bottom for my list.
Wow, that's powerful. Wow.
However, I think if that's the reason you're here is to understand what's in this guy's brain, what makes him popular for better and worse, this is one of the most instructive books we've ever read. It's kind of difficult to analyze because, like, again, a lot of what we're going to say is we're going to bring up the summary and go, I can't believe this bitch put that in there.
So right. I do want to hear you dig into like what you like articulate what you mean by it being representative of Sanderson. Like what specifically like kind of stood out to you?
Well, I mean, the first thing of like Taylor's point of Mr. Leeds is an author. He's not really a hallucinating thing. This is how Sanderson talks about his characters, is like the characters live in his head and they talk to him. Also the fact that he's cast specific people as them, like specific actors as well. Again, tying into Kirk's theory of like all of these are, let's do this movie in my setting. So much of his work as he thinks about, I mean, like the psychology is superpower too, I think is really instructive. Like there's a reason I read the preface there of like, in many ways, this is the most Sanderson book we've ever seen. We've got weird Mormon shit. We've got really shitty representation stuff. We've got wild tonal clashing. Weird movie references. Another one that really struck me right at the beginning. When JC is shooting the photo of Osama bin Laden, he's also listening to Beethoven at max volume. And I think that's a Clockwork Orange reference. The, like, famous, like, Stanley Kubrick film and, like, Russian novel about, I mean, to oversimplify the plot of that movie, about, like, psychological torture and when state violence is done to someone who's done something wrong, who is really the true criminal and all that sort of thing. But, like, very famously, one of the most famous scenes in that movie is, like, doing the main character fantasizing to, like, really sick violence, listening to Beethoven. And I'm like, is that a direct reference? I don't know, because it doesn't feel like a movie Sanderson would like, but also, I don't know, it was a really popular movie. I'm fucking losing it.
I do just want to dig into that a little bit more, because I feel like you're the type to pick up on these things more than I do. Like, I read it and it was just like, when I think like, oh, this feels very Sanderson, what I mean is, like, it feels like Sanderson's approach to writing fantasy, and the way he does tips and the way he, like, has a rhythm of that applied to, like, real world. Like, have we read it? I don't know if there's anything else he's written or we've read. Well, I guess technically Alcatraz, but not really. That's like meant to take place just like in the real world. And I feel like so far you've kind of said this is very Sanderson, but I really want to dig into, like, articulating why. Because so far we've been saying that in a sort of, like, it self-evidently is so way, rather than a, like, really going into detail about, like, what about this what do you learn about Sanderson from this?
Doing this project, Sanderson's isms, I think, jump out at me. And I find myself very easily kind of latching on to them. I think that just having read kind of at the extremes, I'm thinking of characters like Hoyt. I'm thinking of characters like Shalon. I'm thinking of characters like Wayne, where there's this kind of humor, there's this way of speaking that is very Sanderson and, like, very clockable. And, like, when I see it at this point, like in The Emperor's Soul, sometimes she would say things in a way that I don't think she would have said them. And they are said in kind of a Sanderson way. Yeah, there's, like, that Sanderson, he, like, jumps in there, and I was wrenched out of the story. Like, there was a few lines of dialogue where I was like, whoa, that's Sanderson. Why are you saying it that way, weirdo? To me, what made this the most pinnacle Sanderson of Sanderson is that there was no character filter to me. Like, Stephen Lee's just was Sanderson. Like,
yeah,
all of those times that I was, like, jumping out like, whoa, that's Sanderson. Like, that was every piece of dialogue. That was every page. Like,
every interaction.
There was no filter. There was no anything. Like, all of the things that, like, to me that I are, like, immediately clock as, like, oh, that's Sanderson, was, like, the entire book, all 100 pages. So that's why I would say that.
Which is then the author comparison then being really interesting, because then, like, it's Stephen Leeds is literally Brandon Sanderson, and the only semblance of character filter we get is his hallucinations, which of course are the hallucinations of the Brandon Sanderson, like, no filter character, like, filtering them in his head, and then, like, but, like, still it's.
And again, like, the fact that the hallucinations are not based in any, like, filtering, like, at its, like, if you were to do the most uncharitable reading of this, which I think in some ways this book invites, given that he says that he's like, this is my most personal and stuff like that. This is a book about, like, a character very similar to Brandon Sanderson, who gets to hang out with all of his favorite movie actors as they go on adventures together.
Why'd you publish this?
Yes. Like,
like, what? What's
we
going
just
on?
had a whole book about art for art's sake. You didn't need to put this out here, my guy. You could have, if you did, it should be on AO3, I guess.
Great fan fiction. Really strange publishing. I
Sorry. It's just like, this guy is a super genius and good at everything. The only limit is, was there a plausible explanation for his hallucination being there? If he really stretches it, it could be like, oh, one of my hallucinations realized he, like, probably could have helped and hopped on a flight to chase after us. And then, like, you could go crazy. I don't know. Sorry. Go
Lights
on.
in the dark type.
Yeah. And again, like Leeds is really offended when Monica is like, we could disprove Christianity. And he makes the accusation of, like, you're disproving ancient religions. And she hits him with, like, are you a believer? And he doesn't really say yes, but, like, the implication in the book is, like, obviously, what else is sensible? I wish I had taken more concrete notes on this one, because, like, I think I was just so shocked and overwhelmed by this book that it's genuinely very hard to discuss in depth, even though I feel like it deserves that. I think it absolutely deserves, like, serious in-depth analysis. I just don't know if I'm equipped to do it.
I think that's more or less how I feel about this. Like, it was the thing that really got to me was that the whole, like, so they go to Israel and they go to Jerusalem because, like, that's where, you know, like, the guy could take a photo of Jesus, you know, being resurrected, or was close enough. And they had this whole plot point where it's like the realization that he must have had help, like he must be working with a group, is because Israel is the safest, like, most highly secure, safest place in the world. There's no way, like, fake passports won't work to get you in there. And then, like, it's like, oh, he must be working with some Christian fundamentalist, or like I think they briefly even float the idea of it's like an Israeli government group or something that's, like, helping him. And then, like, no, it is Islamic terrorists, but not, like, local Islamic terrorists, like Islamic terrorists from a different part of the world. And it's just, it's so many layers of, like, it you know what? It really puts into contrast how some of the twists in fantasy are probably pretty implausible when you apply them to, like, slightly more real world groups. And it's like, oh, wait, this is actually just fucking ridiculous.
I mean, like, yeah, whenever Sanderson does real world stuff, it almost feels like a conspiracy theory. And, like, I mean, that's the whole bit in Alcatraz, is, like, conspiracy stuff. This one is played way straighter than Alcatraz. And I think that's part of the reason the book is so alarming, because, like, again, can you imagine Sazed negotiating with terrorists? Because that's a thing that basically happens in this book, where, like, a character who has a lot in common with Sazed gives Stephen the correct words to say when speaking to a terrorist leader. That's the reason it's so alarming, is all of a sudden the tone difference is so much more dramatic than it is in something like Mistborn, where it's like, oh, it's weird that sometimes this book is kind of rapey and violent, when normally it's so YA and, like, friendly in so many other ways.
Yeah.
Whereas with this one, imagine the YA-friendly tone, and then going into, again, real-world organizations committing real-world violence. It's just so
Incredible.
shocking. And again, on the point of conspiracy theories, literally the first line of that we hear JC speak, or, like, that Stephen says to JC is, like, JC, what the fuck are you doing? We have a gun range in the mansion for a reason. Also, Osama bin Laden's been dead for years. To which JC replies with, that's just what they told you. That's a story we made up, kid.
Oh my god, that's so true. Oh my god.
Which, I mean,
No.
like, is JC supposed to be a caricature? Is JC supposed
He's supposed to be a
have, like,
caricature,
hidden
of course.
knowledge? Yeah, of course. But, like, I don't even know. And then also his hallucinations are hooking up with each other. It's a whole thing.
That's a thing. JC makes out with his psychiatrist, Ivy, in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's a weird thing to put in your book.
I thought that JC, first of all, having the whole book introduced with JC and then revealing what the actual tone to the book was, whiplash, and then we've got a good amount of time where we are not talking to JC, and, you know, we're just talking to, like the student, and then we start, like, doing the photographs, and he comes in like a wrecking ball. Like, he is so not in the tone of the book at all. It's like, why is a guy with a gun here? Put the sword away, man. We don't need this warrior guy. Like, we just have a normal ass fuck. It's crazy.
And also the fact that he's, like, not a warrior as in, like, someone who's trained themselves. He's explicitly a part of, like, the U.S. state military apparatus and, like, the military-industrial complex. Because he's not just, like, a guy who's good with guns. He's not a gunslinger. He's a Navy SEAL.
Okay, we were shown that Stephen Leeds needs to at least expose himself to the information for an aspect to be formed of it. Like, he doesn't actually go through the work to learn all of Hebrew, but he, like, skims through like a Hebrew English like translator book. So I guess he, like, exposed himself at one point to the U.S. military to get JC. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely knows he knows about guns because, like, him and JC talk about guns. It was also very jarring to see my sword fantasy author really getting into the nitty-gritty of these guns. I was like, is this what's going on in your brain? This is what's going on in your brain.
Sorry, this is the writing. This is at the same time as he wrote the whole writing as observation thing about him, like in the postscript of Emperor's Soul. This is all at the same time as he's really into this, really into this whole idea of like, yeah, like obviously you can't write what you know is not literal. Like you can't just write things you actually experience, but it's about putting together your observations about the world. And Stephen Leeds is just the character who just observes the world and then invents it. Like literally Brandon Sanderson has talked about how he's not like an expert in forgery, but he just like observes enough that he can make a character that's a convincing expert in forgery. And then we have a book about a character whose whole superpower is he invents experts in things after he just observes it a little bit.
Incredible.
I'm going insane.
Thank you, Jack, for making that connection.
That's incredible. No, like these two together are incredible. Like, Graham, you're so right. You have to read Emperor's Soul and Legion like back to back. Doesn't matter which one you read first, but like that's Sanderson.
Close on Emperor's Soul so you can have a palate cleanser.
So true.
Oh my
so
God.
true.
But again, like, genuinely now, if someone was like, I need to understand this author to write a paper about him, I would point to these two.
Frankly, yeah. Yeah, go for it. Not just one. It has to be both. It has to be both.
And it's why the method is really paying off, because again, so much of him is in here, and this book is embarrassing in a lot of ways. I think is what's like. I'm sorry to be mean, and also like if you are religious, like that is totally fine. Like I have many religious people in my life. I'm deeply respectful of it. That's fine. However, I do think, and like atheists are not immune to this either, God knows, the idea of being very, very smug and self-satisfied of like your own correctness. But like the fact that they find a copy of The God Delusion and the character we're supposed to like has written rebuttals is like, I don't say this lightly, it feels kind of cringe. Of like, are you so insecure that you want to like write this sort of thing to prove that you're wrong? Like that would be fine as an exercise to do, particularly if you had like a faithful reading group or something like that. But the fact that it reads as insecure in his own faith, and it like needs to be validated by this time travel camera and something like that, because
for the character or for Sanderson,
a little bit of both.
Because I have had, from Elantris, book 1, I'm like, this guy's pretty insecure about his faith. Like, that's really obvious to me.
This book exists as a way to write a thing that's like, oh, what if I had confirmation that it was true, actually? And, like, you know what? That's fine. Like, if you write this as something to yourself to comfort yourself, or, like, a way of working through this lack of faith or whatever. But it's so transparent. And... again, the faith is handled so much more interestingly in Emperor's Soul, or even in something like Way of Kings or Mistborn, where like God is way more nebulous, and the act of faith of like you just have to believe. Like the whole thing is like you have to believe without knowing. And there's some interesting stuff in here about this. But again, when it butts up against like this real world stuff, it suddenly is just it reads like self-insert fan fiction. And there's nothing wrong with self-insert fan fiction. It's just an unusual thing for a man who is 35 to be writing.
I agree. It's all very strange. No, Cosme or Hoyd's not.
Hoyd's not in it, but if he was, it'd be the main fucking character.
No, Hoyd is in it because Hoyd is one of the voices in Brandon Sanderson heads, and Stephen Leeds is Brandon Sanderson.
Sure.
Hoyd is one of the
So
aspects.
true.
I'm saying it right now.
So true.
Or we are going to
He
get an
definitely is.
aspect in one of the sequel books that is basically just Hoyd.
I mean,
Oh,
I'm
for
really
sure.
looking
I'm calling
forward
it right
to
now.
the sequels. I don't think they're going to be good, but again, I think they're going to be fascinating in the same way. And I think now that we've had this, we will in some ways be more prepared for the next Legion book. Because again, This was so
I will
shocking.
be paying so much more attention. Yeah, and like I agree with you, Graham, where I was just like, what the fuck am I reading? And I didn't, it takes you till the end when you like really kind of like look back and you're like, whoa.
I'm like, what was that?
What was that? Like, what did we just read?
God, this guy building a mansion because he has to have a room for every one of his aspects. And like some of the aspects recognize and accept their hallucinations, and some of them are like, no, I'm not a hallucination. What are you talking about?
I don't know. I have encountered many different authors with theories of fiction like this. Like, in some ways, this has overlap with like Grant Morrison and their theory of fiction. I think their theory of fiction works for me better, although I still pretty much disagree with Morrison's. In some ways, this is in line with, I'm sorry to bring up like a terrible person, but Neil Gaiman's theory of fiction. There's a story he wrote called The Last Sandman Story, where he's like, I don't believe in the shit that I wrote. It's all made up. However, here are 3 times that I encountered like things that felt like they were in my world that I wrote, and I don't have an explanation for it, and it's really bizarre. On Halloween one time in New York City, a dude dressed as Corazon came up to him and asked to borrow a cigarette, and he's like, wow, you look exactly like a character I wrote in a comic book. And the guy replies, I'm not a character you wrote, I'm that guy. Put me in the next issue.
That's New York.
That's New York as hell. Or women who look like Death, his character Death. Dave McKean was on a flight where a woman who looked like Death was on the plane and someone had a heart attack on the flight. They both acknowledge of like, one of our fans was there. Because it can't be this thing that we actually did. And I don't know. I disagree with that theory of fiction. I mean, I find it very charming.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things he made up. I mean, apart from the religion, which, who knows?
How about like Stephanie Meyer about her? There's this incredible video of Robert Pattinson talking about his experience with Stephanie Meyer and just being like, she thinks that he's like real. Like she thinks that Edward is like real, and that like she said that she begged Edward not to go to Italy in the second book, and he just like refused. Like he had to go to Italy. He had to leave, and she like begged him not to. She gave him all these different plot points that he wouldn't leave her and go to Italy, but he had to. And it was just like, that's kind of what I'm seeing here with Sanderson. Just like,
I mean, not to make the Mormonism like the skeleton key, but Stephanie Meyer also famously Mormonism.
so true. So fucking true.
The thing
So
is, I mean,
true.
I'm just curious, Taylor, you and I, we both do, creative writing. We write stories as a hobby a lot. Have you ever felt something similar to that at all in your writing? Because I can say that I don't think I can relate to those experiences when I write. I feel in control of my characters. I feel like I'm not, and I've never had that sense of like the characters are doing their own thing and I'm just kind of watching and I invent it. Like I don't think I ever have approached fiction that way.
Oh, I definitely approach fiction that way. To me, what's exciting is setting up 2 personalities, putting them in a situation, and then, so that's kind of how I write, is like, I don't actually know how this interaction is going to go out, but I know they're 2 personalities. I know what context they're in. Let's kind of see what organically kind of comes up from this. And to me, that does feel like a lot of times the characters taking their own agency in me writing them, being like, oh yeah, no, this character definitely wouldn't let this other character get away with shit. I didn't think about that when I was writing my, like when I was plotting. But now that I'm here, I'm like, well, damn, that character's definitely going to have to say that. And like, this whole thing is going to have to change.
I will have those organic developments of like story or whatever, but it always felt more to me like I'm improving with myself rather than this sense of like the
True.
character being its own unique like
No,
entity.
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Writing to me is just talking to yourself all day.
No, that's literally it. That's literally it's like, yeah, I don't literally know what I'm going to say to myself, but I am talking to I am fully aware of and know that I am talking to myself.
I don't think I've had the Stephanie Meyer level of delusion. That's that I think she has something special there with her Edward.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I want to keep talking about this, but I also don't know what to say.
I don't know that we have much else to say other than the comparison. We've made the comparison out of Soul. If I feel like if we're going to talk more about this, we either need to talk for like 3 more hours or not at all. Like there's not really a
Yeah.
That's the thing. I really want to say more about this. I think I would have to reread it.
Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to do that.
I am, but
I'm
I
willing
think
to
I would
listen.
only do it for the next episode on Legion.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's fair. That's like next year too, so it's not too far away.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
In that case, we got to do outro because we didn't do it for the. Emperor's
Well, we're all
Soul.
just sitting here shell-shocked. This is my new bottom of my rankings. And I think the two of you chose to not rank it, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna rank it because I'm not gonna remember it. But I do think I'll rank the trilogy. I think I'll put the entire trilogy onto the rankings,
Sure.
but not until I'm done with the third book.
I was only planning on ranking the fiction books, not the autobiographies.
So true.
but
So true. Not the nonfiction.
Yeah, so this is the new bottom, and the two of you are not ranking, and I think that's totally reasonable. Jesus Christ.
hey, wasn't it fun when
JC.
Kirk Hamilton was here?
It was Kirk, we miss you already. Next month, we'll be sticking with books that I think are going to overwhelm us, because we are reading A Memory of Lights. We are reading the last book of the Wheel of Time.
That word "last" is giving me so much life. Anyway,
It's not though, because we have to read a novella two months later.
Yeah.
fine.
September. And I
It's
think
a novella.
Sophie's joining us for that one too. Sophie's joining us for that, so maybe we'll have some.
We could ask Sophie if she wants to actually read that, because she doesn't have to, but God, we would appreciate it if she
God.
does. We'll see you in July for A Memory of Lights. Until then, grab a book and hit the beach.
Have a book and hit the beach.
Grab a hip. Whoa. Grab a book and hit the beach. Whatever.
That was the sound of a new aspect forming just in her brain, glitching for a second.
So true.
I
love you
Stop
guys.
the recording. Love you all.
A Grain of Sanderson is created by Graham Gilman, Taylor Lane, and Jack McLaughlin. I edit and produce the show. Our logo is by our very talented friend Ven Busby. Our theme music is Goodnight Kiss by Too Mellow off the album Midnight Broadcasts. You can find their work at twomellow.net, that's the number 2, MELLO, and twomellow at bandcamp.com. If you'd like to support the Beachcombers further, you can do that in the following ways. First, please tell your friends about this podcast. Sharing the pod in a Discord, writing a thoughtful post on social media, or otherwise telling your friends really helps us out. You can also support us by following us on social media. Taylor works very hard on our Instagram. Or by buying a book from our bookshop, of which we see a small cut. Both those links are in the episode description. Questions, critiques, encouragement? Please write us an email at agrainofsanderson@gmail.com. Or join our Discord. A link is available in our show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Hey everyone, Graham here at the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. Just wanted to give a little bit of announcement here. Unfortunately, there is no episode for July. The Wheel of Time beat us. We were fully defeated. This is June's episode that is coming very late. It was completely lost twice in the edit, so this is my third time editing it all the way to the end. And it is backed up on 3 different devices, so I can't lose it. But I just wanted to let you know what the Wheel of Time beating us means. We don't actually think there is enough for a full episode on A Memory of Light. It is a very, very long book, and I think parts of it are good, but really the only stuff that's kind of worth talking about as it relates to this podcast is the very end. So we're going to dedicate half an hour to an hour to the very end of A Memory of Light in our next episode, and then we'll just also do the Rithmatist then. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and grab a book and hit the beach.